Husband discovers wife's cheating, takes ultimate revenge, and disappears without a trace. Flo, or Florence, was my spouse. I'm Jim. We met in college and tied the knot shortly after graduating. Our life together followed the usual path of husband and wife, with kids, a home, and a mortgage. Flo stayed home to care for our children until they grew up. Then she went back to her career in real estate. Flo's an attractive woman, and I reckon she faced some teasing at work from time to time, but, as far as I know, she stayed loyal to me in our marriage. She has a bit of a naughty sense of humor sometimes, which I reckon might have caused some trouble in our marriage. We had 2 kids, a boy named Eric and a girl named Patty. When this all went down, Eric was 21 and had finished vocational school. He had his own place nearby and worked as an electrician. Patty was 19 and studying at a state university about 150 miles away. With the kids out of the picture, we looked ahead to a happy retirement, hoping for some travel and, hopefully, grandchildren to spoil. Our bed life was what I'd consider normal. We had a loving relationship that grew over our years together. Initially, we were physically engaged almost every night and on weekends, but over time, it tapered to a couple of times a week, which was fine by me but seemed to diminish Flo's interest too. Over time, I mastered pushing all the right buttons to bring Flo to her peak, yet nearly every scenario comes with a snag. Ours arrived in the form of a new neighbor, about 5 years back. Roger and his wife Alice moved in next door, and we struck up a friendship. The issue with Roger was his love for pranks. He'd pull them on anyone he could, much to my dismay. I often found myself on the receiving end. What bothered me even more was Flo's enjoyment of his antics, especially when they targeted me. I tried explaining my discomfort to her, even joining in at times, but she didn't listen or back down. With time, I noticed Roger's interest in Flo, suspecting he harbored desires beyond mere friendship. Whenever we were together, he and Flo shared laughs over his sometimes crude jokes, leaving Alice and me to politely smile at their antics. In public, I could tell Alice felt as disheartened as I did about their behavior. I vividly recall one day at the beach when Roger mocked some boars passing by, and to my dismay, Flo joined in. Alice and I were stunned by their recklessness, but our reprimands fell on deaf ears as they laughed uproariously together. Right before the conclusion, I started sensing things spiraling out of hand. We were over at Roger and Alice's place, with Alice and I chilling in the backyard while Flo went inside with Roger to help grab drinks. We chatted for a bit until we realized they'd been gone for a while. Concerned, we headed indoors to find them in the kitchen. We found no one, but as we began searching, they strolled out of the living room, arms wrapped around each other, giggling away. Roger sported lipstick smudges on his collar and around his mouth, while Flo's lipstick was askew and her hair tousled. Alice and I stood there, mouths agape, utterly taken aback. "Hey guys, sorry for the delay on drinks. Got caught up showing Flo my artwork," Roger said, seemingly oblivious to their appearance. Alice and I remained rooted in shock, stunned by their brazen display. "Roger's got some amazing prints. You know what I mean, right, Alice?" Flo chimed in with a smirk. At that point, I gathered my thoughts and finally spoke up. "What's happening here?" I directed at Flo. "Why does Roger have lipstick all over him and you look like you've been kissed?" "Oh, that's because I got really into admiring Roger's engravings. I guess I got carried away." "You're not mad, are you?" she asked, trying to maintain a composed demeanor. As I studied their expressions, it dawned on me. Roger had that smirk he gets when he's about to pull one of his jokes, and Flo was avoiding my gaze, struggling not to burst into laughter. My irritation flared. Alice, still unaware, chimed in at last. "What's happening, Roger? If you think you can carry on with another woman in our home, you better think again," as Roger and Flo erupted into laughter. I think Alice caught on and smiled sheepishly, but I couldn't contain my anger. "One of these days, you two will push it too far, and it won't end well." "Oh, lighten up, darling. It's just a prank. If you could see how you both looked, you'd find it funny too," Flo said between laughs. "Come on, guys, let me fix you a drink and we can all laugh this off," Roger chimed in, strolling into the kitchen with Flo trailing behind, still giggling. Alice and I simply shrugged and trailed after them, shaking our heads in disgust. "One day, Alice, they're going to push it too far," I reiterated. "One of these days, their pranks will backfire and someone will get hurt." Alice nodded in agreement. That night, when we returned home, I could tell Flo sensed my lingering anger, especially regarding her role in the prank. "I'm really sorry, honey," she said. "I just got carried away. Nothing serious happened. I just smeared some lipstick on him and messed up his hair. We never expected you guys to be upset. We were about to call it off when you and Alice showed up. Are you still mad?" "It was just a joke." "I'm trying not to be, Flo, but you have to stop getting involved in Roger's pranks. I nearly had a heart attack seeing you look like you were kissing him. You know how important loyalty is to me. I understand, honey. I value loyalty just as much and would never do anything to hurt you. Just please remember that, okay? Give me a passionate kiss and forgive me, she pleaded. A couple of weeks later, we were back at Roger and Alice's for dinner on a Saturday night. Just as we finished eating, a call came in that Roger mistakenly thought was for Alice. Alice worked as an ER nurse at a local hospital. After he hung up, he turned to Alice. It's the ER. There's been a bad car wreck, and they need you there as soon as possible. Ah, damn, let me change and head out. 10 minutes later, Alice was on her way to the hospital. Once she'd left, Roger turned to me and asked if I could lend a hand with a project in his basement. While I helped, Flo remained silent, avoiding eye contact. At the time, I didn't think much of it, but later it struck me. What do you need? I asked, getting up to join him downstairs. I need you to hold something for me while I fix it to the ceiling. It's not too heavy, but I can't hold it up and attach it at the same time, and Alice is too short for this. Sure, sounds straightforward. Trust me, it is. It'll only take a minute. As we descended the stairs, he directed me to a metal support post near the stove on the floor above. He took a small metal box with a power cord hanging from it off his workbench and hoisted it up to the ceiling between the support post and the furnace. I noticed Flo had followed us down and was watching with a smile. Again, I didn't think much of her presence or her odd grin. Now, I need you to hold this while I attach it, Roger instructed. What's this for? I questioned, lifting my hands to grasp the box. With Roger between the pipe and the furnace, I had to wrap my hands around the pipe to press the box against the basement ceiling. I'll explain in a sec, but let me grab my tools first. He vanished behind his desk, leaving me holding the box. He returned moments later, and I didn't see what he had until I felt 2 quick clicks as something hard and metallic closed around my wrists. Suddenly, I realized I'd been tricked. I was handcuffed to the pipe. Shocked, I turned to see Roger putting his arm around Flo's waist as they looked at me. My mind raced, but I managed to demand, "What's going on, Roger? Get these damn cuffs off." "Sorry, buddy, can't do that. Flo's so fond of my prince she wants another look. But this time, we don't need you or Alice around," he explained as he and Flo ascended the basement steps. Flo exaggeratedly swayed her hips as they left. "Let me loose. This is going too far, Roger. You'll regret it if you don't release me right now." "Relax, dear. I just want to admire some engravings," Flo chuckled as they disappeared, leaving me struggling with the handcuffs. As I tried to free myself, I realized the hopelessness of my situation. The pipe was anchored in the concrete floor below and secured to a steel I-beam overhead. As I strained to hear, I sensed their movement into the master bedroom directly above me, accompanied by Flo's excited giggles. Shoes thudded onto the carpet above, and I heard hurried whispers urging the removal of garments. "Brian, I desire you greatly," Flo whispered urgently. My fury mounted as I continued to frantically struggle with the handcuffs. Above, the bed began to creak, and I imagined them engaging in intimacy. I cursed the restraints and my disloyal wife overhead. My wrists grew raw and bloody from my relentless efforts. Emotions churned within me as Roger grunted and Flo moaned in unison. Then, silence blanketed the upstairs for a brief moment. Ceasing my struggles, I lay on the unforgiving cement floor, hands clasped around the pipe. A profound sadness settled in my heart as Flo exclaimed, "That was amazing, Roger. I'll have to admire your work again someday." "Let's dress and check on Jim downstairs," Roger replied. "Sure, Flo, I need a breather, but Alice might return soon from that phony call I made, and I'd rather she not find us in bed together." Minutes later, footsteps echoed on the basement stairs, but I didn't lift my gaze as they neared my prone form. Oh, damn, look at his wrists all bloody," Flo gasped. "Honey, it was just a prank. Nothing happened." "Oh God, I'm so sorry. Roger, hurry and unlock the cuffs so we can tend to his wrists. Oh God, I never thought he'd take it this hard." Tears streamed down my face as Roger fumbled with the handcuff key. "Roger, hand Flo the key before you unlock me and run. Once I'm free, you'll regret ever being born," I warned, glaring at him. He met my gaze wordlessly, passing the key to Flo as he edged toward the stairs. Fear flickered in his eyes while Flo began unlocking the handcuffs. Once the cuffs were off, I heard Roger's truck revving up, tires screeching as he peeled away. Rising to my feet, I peered down at Flo, still crouched on the floor, fear etched across her face. "You better find somewhere else to stay tonight, or I could seriously hurt you. Call before you attempt to come home." Tears streamed down her cheeks as she grasped the magnitude of the pain she'd caused. "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry. It was just a prank. We didn't do anything." "Flo, I don't want to hear excuses about it being a joke ever again. To me, it's as if you cheated, and that's all that matters now. From here on out, I'll treat it as infidelity and betrayal. Expect a call from my lawyer soon. We're finished, I declared, turning and ascending the stairs. No, Jim, please. Nothing happened, she cried out from the basement. What do I tell the kids? I didn't respond, heading toward the front door. Just as I was getting into my car, a frantic Alice pulled into their driveway. Where the hell is my lousy husband? There was no accident, and I didn't need an ambulance, she exclaimed as she stepped out of the car. Suddenly, she noticed my wrists. What happened, Jim? Dear God, look at your wrists. Let me bandage them for you. Roger and Flo pulled another stunt, I sighed. Alice, they've crossed the line this time. I'm divorcing Flo. Oh God, what happened? She asked, her voice filled with concern. You'll hear it from Flo and Roger. I'm heading home to take care of my wounds. Once there, you can inform my cheating ex-wife that she'll find her belongings on the porch. If she wants back in, she'll need a court order. Oh God, what did they do? Alice wailed, rushing into the house in distress. I climbed into my car, my anger simmering. Arriving home, I cleansed my wrists with antibacterial soap, applied ointment, and bandaged them methodically. I packed Flo's belongings into plastic bags, placing them outside. Ignoring the ringing phone, I focused on the task. After locking up, I undressed and lay on the bed, unable to sleep despite my exhaustion. In the morning, the phone rang again, but I declined to answer. After showering and eating breakfast, I changed my bandages. Around 10, the doorbell chimed, and I peered out to find Alice on the doorstep. Inviting her in, I gestured for her to enter. They really went too far this time, didn't they? She remarked as she stepped inside. Unfortunately, yes, I replied. What's your plan? She inquired as I told her. I'm filing for divorce, but they claim nothing happened. Just another one of their jokes. Flo really wants to talk to you, Alice mentioned. My perception is that they did it, and as far as I'm concerned, that's reality. I'll schedule a meeting with a divorce attorney first thing Monday, I responded calmly. You're incredibly upset, aren't you? Can't you wait until you've cooled off before making such a drastic decision? You've invested nearly 24 years in each other. Don't you want to salvage anything? She reasoned. I won't tolerate being betrayed. I've warned Flo numerous times, and in my eyes, she betrayed me. It's over, I declared. But they insist nothing actually happened. They just made it seem that way, Alice argued. Their words are not proof. It felt as though it could have happened, I explained. And they can't prove it didn't happen, so I have to trust my perception that it did. She showed no respect for me, I stated firmly. Can't you hold off and seek counseling? Flo's devastated by this, Alice pleaded. I warned her before, but she didn't listen, I retorted. I've said my piece. Let the lawyer handle it. If you're content with Roger's involvement, that's your choice, but he'd better steer clear of me, I concluded. I haven't decided what to do about Roger yet, but I hate to see our friendship end over this. Roger feels genuinely sorry and wants me to pass on his sincere apologies to you, Alice said. Make it clear that our friendship is over, I insisted. Although I'd like to stay friends, Alice, I think it's best if we don't see each other while you're still with him. Is there anything I can tell Flo to give her hope for your forgiveness? Alice asked. If she can prove she didn't sleep with Roger, I'll consider it. I don't trust Roger or her word that it was just a joke. I feel like it happened, and that's enough for me, I replied. Okay, Jim, I'll let her know. I'll miss you, Alice said sadly. I'll miss you too, Alice. Let me load Flo's things into your car so you can take them to her. I assume you still have it. She's moving in with her sister this afternoon. Her sister lives on the other side of town. She's a widow and lives alone, so there's space for Flo, maybe indefinitely. After loading Flo's belongings into Alice's car, I waved her off, then returned to the house. First, I looked up a locksmith to change the locks. It occurred to me that if I went to work on Monday and Flo changed the locks, I'd end up locked out. I arranged for the locksmith to come the same day. Then I unplugged my phone and switched off my cell. I dedicated the entire day to household chores until the locksmith's arrival. Once he departed, I hopped into my car and made a trip to the local supermarket, stocking up on a few frozen dinners to sustain me for about a week. Upon returning to my now solitary home, I couldn't shake the absence of Flo after nearly 24 years together. However, my anger toward her and what she, along with Roger, had done lingered. Around 7:30 that evening, while watching TV, the doorbell chimed. Peering out the window, I spotted Flo's sister, Mary, at the doorstep. Hello, Mary, I greeted as I opened the door for her. Hi, Jim. Can I have a moment of your time? Of course, Mary. Come on in, I welcomed. We proceeded to the living room where she settled into a seat while I asked if she wanted a drink. A Coca-Cola would be fine, she requested. After fetching the drinks, I returned to the living room. "I suppose you know why I'm here," she began after taking a sip. "Yes. Are you here to plead for her return?" "If so, you've come in vain," I responded bluntly. "No, she confided in me about everything." "How are your wrists?" she inquired. "They're healing, scabbing over, no signs of infection," I informed her. "Flo will be relieved to hear that," Mary remarked. "She's on the brink of a breakdown, particularly because you refuse to speak with her. That's why I'm here, to deliver a message, or rather a few messages," she continued. "Very well. I'll hear your messages, but I can't promise anything in return," I stated. "Firstly, she loves you deeply and regrets her actions," Mary conveyed. "All right. Anything else?" I prompted. "She wants you to know she's willing to undergo a lie detector test to prove she's telling the truth. It's the only proof she can offer that nothing happened with Roger or anyone else," Mary disclosed. This proposition was a novel idea I hadn't considered. I pondered it for a moment while Mary observed me, sipping her cola. "It sounds typical, but I have conditions. Firstly, proof that she didn't sleep with Roger doesn't guarantee reconciliation. Secondly, Roger must also undergo the same test with matching results. Thirdly, I require approval from the test administrator for questions. Lastly, I won't cover the test expenses." "That seems fair, Jim, but wouldn't you consider reconciliation more if the tests prove their honesty?" "No. She deeply wounded me. Even if I decide to take her back, it will take a long time to forgive her," I asserted. "Understood, Jim. I'll convey your terms to her. I'm truly sorry. I intended to be furious with her for her foolishness when she came by this afternoon. However, she looked so distressed that I doubt anything I could say would worsen her state. She's aware of her grave mistake and the pain she's caused you. I'll give her some sleeping pills to help her rest tonight. Also, she contacted your children and confessed her actions. They seemed upset with her, as she hasn't stopped crying since speaking with them. I should return to deliver your message. Thanks for the cola." "No problem, Mary. I appreciate your concern." After her departure, I reflected on the situation. Some of my initial rage had subsided, allowing me to think more clearly about my desires. I decided to have a drink first, heading to my office where the drinks cabinet stood. Pouring myself half a glass of scotch, I added an ice cube in the kitchen. Without returning to my seat, I wandered the house, reminiscing about our shared married life. Did I truly want to end it all? My contemplation was interrupted by the doorbell ringing. Peering out the window, I spotted our daughter Patty standing at the front door, visibly discontent. Oh, I thought. She might have realized the locks were changed and her key didn't work. Upon opening the door, Patty strode inside, casting me a hostile glance. "What's up with the locks, Dad? And why are you ignoring calls? I had to drive 150 miles to get some answers." "Sorry, Patty. I didn't mean to avoid talking to your mother. I heard from Aunt Mary that she briefed you on what happened." "Yeah, and I'm really upset with you for kicking her out just because of a joke. Can't you forgive her and let her come home?" When she phoned me to disclose her actions, I realized she acted foolishly. Patty, it transcended mere humor. I had previously cautioned her about the pranks she and Roger engaged in, but she disregarded my warnings. I couldn't glean much from Mom during our phone conversation, but I gathered it was intended as a jest. What could be so objectionable about that? I elaborated on the events, starting with the earlier lipstick smudge prank and our ensuing conversations. Then I recounted the more serious joke, revealing the scars on my wrists by rolling up my sleeves. "Daddy, this is awful." "Is that when you asked her to leave?" "Yes, it seemed like they might have had lovemaking. It sounded just like they described, and I know your mom's bedroom noises. Either that, or they're exceptional actors. I believe they did it. That's my reality. Unless she proves otherwise, I suggested your mom take a lie detector test, and Roger too. If the results prove true, I'll have to trust her, but it hurt deeply that she thought I'd find being betrayed a joke. I might not be able to reconcile with her. I'm really sorry about all this, Dad. I hope you and Mom can work through it because I love you both despite what she did. I'm trying to make it work, baby, because I miss your mom dearly, but I'm still struggling with her lack of respect for me." "Okay, Daddy, I understand. Now that I know what happened, I'm going to visit Mom and try to calm her down. I'll probably stay at Aunt Mary's tonight, and I have to return to school tomorrow. Please turn on your phone so I can reach you. Eric also wants to talk to you. He's working upstate and tried to call you after Mom contacted him." "Sure, baby. I'll switch the phones back on once you're gone. Come here for a hug." I embraced her tightly, feeling how much she resembled her mother, which was both comforting and unsettling. I cherished her deeply. She'd always been my little girl. "Goodbye, Daddy," she said, opening her car door. I waved as she drove off, then returned inside, resuming my solitary drink and turning my phones back on. A couple of days after Flo's sister Mary visited, she called to inform me that Flo had agreed to my terms for the lie detector test, and Roger had also consented. Roger offered to cover the cost of his test as a sign of remorse for his involvement in the prank. Mary also provided me with the contact information for the testing administrator. My anger toward Flo for her involvement in the prank had somewhat subsided, but I felt deeply despondent. If she truly loved me and hadn't been physically engaged with Roger, how could she participate in such a humiliating joke? I began to entertain the possibility that her love for me had waned, despite her claims of wanting reconciliation. It boiled down to whether I was willing to endure a loveless marriage if tests confirmed no carnal involvement. Flo attempted to reach out to me multiple times, but I promptly ended the calls upon hearing her voice. Subsequently, her sister acted as an intermediary, relaying Flo's apologies and desires to reconcile. However, I maintained my stance, insisting on awaiting the results of the lie detector tests before making any decisions. During this period, our son Eric fervently urged me to forgive his mother and allow her to return home. Despite my efforts to explain the situation and the hurt her actions caused, he struggled to comprehend my pain and persisted in his plea for her return. I realized that our relationship could become strained if we ended up divorcing. Thankfully, our daughter Patty showed more empathy and support for my situation. After Mary provided me with the test administrator's contact details, I reached out to legal and law enforcement acquaintances for insights. Reassured by their recommendations, I scheduled an appointment with the administrator, confident in his ability to conduct an impartial test. The following day, I discovered that Flo and Roger had already contacted the test administrator, Jack Heron, and scheduled tests for both of them in 2 days. They designated me as an interested party authorized to control the questions asked. I informed my boss the next day about needing personal time and visited Jack Heron's office. After explaining the situation to him, we discussed the questions he would pose to determine whether Flo and Roger had engaged in carnal activity. Jack assured me that he would ask the same questions to both parties, compile their responses, and provide a final written report. He agreed that matching test results from both would confirm no carnal activity. Had this not been the outcome, trust in Flo might have been irreparable, leading to inevitable divorce if the tests indicated lying. Returning to work, I felt more assured that clarity regarding any carnal involvement would soon emerge, yet I acknowledged that challenging decisions lay ahead. Over the next 3 days, I adhered to my usual work routine, staying late to avoid returning to an empty home. Evening meals were taken at a nearby diner, followed by whiskey at home, where sleep was elusive. The absence of Flo's warmth and love weighed heavily on me. Before the morning of the test, uncertainty lingered. However, a clear lie detector report would pave the way for Flo's return, with the assurance that she'd refrain from any more insensitive pranks, especially after seeing how deeply the last one affected me. The tranquility lasted until the phone rang just after 11. It was Alice. "Jim, it's Alice. I found something important. Roger's at the testing center. Can you come now?" Her tone sounded ominous, prompting me to rush next door. Following our usual routine, I entered through the front door and heard Alice's voice from the office. Inside, I found her at her desktop computer, wearing a concerned expression. "Jim, I need you to see this." I pulled up a chair beside her. "Jim, Roger's been acting secretive since Tuesday. A couple of times I caught him quickly minimizing something on the monitor when I passed by this door. Also, he tends to leave the room when he's on the phone. I'm pretty sure he spoke to Flo yesterday. This is my first chance to check our computer without him around." With that, Alice clicked on the Google icon, revealing his search history since Tuesday. My blood ran cold as I scanned through some of the research. There were 4 different searches on how to beat a lie detector test. Alice and I sat side by side, reading through many of the pages her husband had browsed. After digesting enough, we retreated to her living room to discuss our findings. Our conversation continued until we heard Roger's car pull up outside. As he entered and greeted us with a wary look, he took a seat on the couch opposite Alice and me. If I hadn't been observant, I might have missed the slight limp as he favored his left leg. This was all the reassurance I needed. "Roger, I believe you passed the test with flying colors." "Honestly, I had a hunch nothing untoward happened that day," I remarked, catching Alice's puzzled glance out of the corner of my eye. I realized I hadn't shared my plan with her yet. I spoke up. "If you promise that you and Flo will never pull another stunt like this again, I'm willing to let bygones be bygones and shake hands. Perhaps even skip reading the report altogether." Relief washed over his face as he readily gave his word. With a smile, I rose from my seat and approached him. As he extended his right hand, I took a step closer, firmly planting my foot on his right leg. The expected discomfort failed to register. Instead, his face drained of color as he let out a piercing scream, collapsing back onto the couch. Frantically, he used both hands to free his foot from under mine, eventually tearing off his shoe. Alice and I watched as the shoe came off, revealing blood-soaked socks. He continued to groan in pain. Glancing sideways at Alice, I saw her discomfort at the sight of blood. Keeping my gaze on her, I smiled as I noticed her realization, connecting our earlier reading with the wound on Roger's leg. I won't bother with the report because I know it'll be nonsense. Did you nail your shoe to press on it while answering their security questions, trying to mask your lies? It had to backfire eventually, didn't it? Trying to induce sweat and a faster heart rate with harmless questions, making the results appear truthful, I concluded. The anguish on Roger's face softened slightly, giving way to a look of despair as he glanced between me and Alice. Yeah, I did cheat. And I showed Flo how to do it, but not for the reason you're thinking. Seriously, man, he confessed. All right, Alice, brace yourself, I remarked as we both resumed our seats, and Roger gently applied pressure to his soul to staunch the bleeding. Observing Alice's disapproving expression at the mess on the floor, I briefly entertained the thought of suggesting that she make him clean the carpet with his tongue. To his credit, Roger remained silent, offering no attempt to dramatize this new revelation. We didn't know what questions you posed to the examiner. What's so complicated about asking if we had lovemaking? I interjected. Sure, we probably would have aced that one, but we were concerned you'd delve into something more subtle. Like what? I prodded further. Well, has our conduct always aligned with the standards of a marital relationship? Roger began, but before he could finish, Alice interjected angrily, indicating an obvious negative response to that query. Why else would you go to the trouble of sticking a damn nail in your shoe before the test? I pressed on. I'm guessing the fact that you arrived with the nail still lodged inside means you forgot to bring extra shoes or a pair of pliers. Planning ahead has never been your strong suit, has it? I added, addressing Alice as I spoke. Please, honey, I didn't want to lose you, and Flo certainly didn't want to lose Jim. So, dear husband, when and what did you do that wouldn't measure up to the standards of a marriage? Alice inquired, her tone stern. Roger shifted uncomfortably in his chair and responded in a subdued voice. It was that day we pretended to be fooling around upstairs. We were just jumping on the bed. As you can imagine, we were both fully clothed, he hurriedly clarified, explaining. We were bouncing on the bed, causing it to squeak. I can't even recall who initiated it, but somehow we began touching each other through our clothes. We both found it enjoyable. We were incredibly foolish. I felt a bit puzzled. I pride myself on being a good judge of character, and this rings true. If not, Roger is exceptionally skilled at conjuring excuses on the spot. I glanced at Alice. Is this satisfactory? I asked. Not even close, she retorted. This pair has demonstrated such proficiency in deception and scheming that I am far from convinced, Alice continued. Roger, tend to your leg, apply some antiseptic, bandage it, and then I suggest you leave. I need time to contemplate, plus there's the matter of cleaning up yet another one of your messes, Alice snapped, indicating a stain on the carpet near Roger's foot. Despite Roger's acting skills, the look of dread on his face betrayed his deep concern about the fate of his marriage. I have a video, Alice, he blurted out suddenly. What? I exclaimed. Simultaneously, we sounded like a twisted duet. I installed a camera in our bedroom before we handcuffed you in the basement. I captured everything, Roger confessed. Before I could react, then why the hell didn't you mention this a few days ago? I demanded. Roger didn't need to respond to that question. If the video depicted them pleasuring each other, even while fully clothed, it wouldn't be something two spouses eager to reconcile with their partners would want to share publicly. Personally, I strongly believe that the boundary of infidelity extends far beyond the actual physical act. Any form of closeness, including a simple kiss on the lips, would constitute crossing a line that should not be crossed. I had the intention to do so, but Flo feared your reaction, Roger explained. We instructed Roger to tend to his leg and then present us with the video. While Roger was out of the room, I sent Flo a message. I couldn't resist adding to her already mounting anxiety. Remove the nail from your shoe and come over to Alice's house. Roger is going to show us a video. Normally, it's just a minute's walk from Mary's house to ours, but it took a good 35 minutes before there was a knock on the door. Alice opened it and welcomed Flo and her sister Mary. Flo's makeup was smudged and her eyes were teary. Mary explained that my wife panicked as soon as she read my message, realizing that I had caught on to her little scheme. Flo appeared far less composed about the test results than Roger did upon his return home. Mary simply glanced at me and raised her eyebrows at Flo's further self-destructive behavior. Flo attempted to embrace me, but I guided her to sit beside me on the couch. She kept studying my expression, seemingly trying to gauge my feelings. I wondered if Mary had any inkling about the contents of the video. Alice and I didn't waste time during those 35 minutes. Our discussion centered around what our likely course of action would be if the video indeed confirmed Roger's claims. Alice had already made up her mind that she would likely forgive Roger for the bedroom incident, albeit after letting him stew for a bit. As for me, I was more conflicted. My initial emotional reaction was that my wife had betrayed me, something I had always deemed unforgivable. However, my logical reasoning was more composed. Flo had been an exemplary wife for 24 years, and our children had made it abundantly clear that they would be devastated if I didn't forgive her. A minute after everyone settled in, Roger arrived with his laptop, a USB flash drive protruding from one port while a cable emerged from the other. He positioned the computer next to the TV and powered it up. I found it odd that he didn't simply insert the flash drive directly into the TV. Then I recalled Alice's remark about his lack of tech savviness. Once the image on the computer screen synchronized with that on the TV, Roger muttered another apology and hit play. Flo kept her gaze averted from everyone in the room, including the TV. She was undoubtedly aware of my uncompromising stance on fidelity, making this an incredibly uncomfortable situation for her. Mary observed the screen intently, seemingly unaware of what was about to unfold. Roger appeared more at ease once again. He settled beside Alice and attempted to hold her hand, but she withdrew it. The clip, lasting about 10 minutes, essentially depicted what Roger had previously described. It was largely devoid of any eroticism. Within moments of its commencement, both protagonists appeared fully clothed, just as Roger had stated. Flo turned him onto his back, then positioned herself on top of him, echoing verbatim what I had heard while handcuffed in the basement. We observed that it was Roger who initiated the hand game, though Flo followed closely behind. This was incredibly difficult for me to witness for several reasons. Firstly, no man with any self-respect, apart from a few outliers, desires to witness his wife in such a scenario with another man. Secondly, it triggered painful PTSD as I relived the words that had devastated me less than a week ago. It reignited the burning and throbbing sensation in my wrists, a painful reminder of my inability to prevent what was unfolding in the room above me. Midway through, I shut my eyes tightly, attempting to block out the sounds. I didn't open them again until the room was filled with the silence that followed their shared climaxes. The silence felt deafening and all-encompassing. Even the normal sounds of breathing seemed absent within the room. I wasn't alone in my turmoil. Glancing at the screen, I saw Flo and Roger quickly separate. The video paused, revealing an empty bed before fading to black. The uncomfortable silence lingered in the room for several tense moments. Once the clip concluded, Mary cast a disgusted look at Flo, while Roger looked hopefully at Alice. Flo stared at a spot on the floor, her focus unwavering. The silence shattered when Alice abruptly rose to her feet, with Roger following suit. "You deceitful traitor!" Alice's words cut through the air, shocking us all. It was the most severe thing I had ever heard her say, surpassing any prior expletives. Roger's expression betrayed his shock at her outburst. The sound of her open palm striking his cheek echoed like a fire shot. She was seething with anger. I've never seen someone so enraged, I thought to myself, watching the scene unfold. But Alice wasn't finished. "Don't you dare touch me, you treacherous little scoundrel," she seethed, her fury palpable. Roger dodged, narrowly avoiding a second slap. He winced, shifting his weight to his right leg, appearing bewildered. "This entire video is fabricated," he insisted. "But why? We had invited Jim and Flo over later that evening, hadn't we? We were planning to relax on the patio, right?" Alice's question came out more like a growl, but due to the rain we opted to stay indoors. "Do you recall now?" Roger still seemed puzzled, but nodded along with Alice's explanation. Alice pointed angrily at the TV screen. "Look at this, fool. The sunlight streaming through the window indicates it's not only a sunny day but also morning. This window doesn't receive direct sunlight until noon. You concocted the entire story, didn't you?" Roger's expression shifted from confusion to horror. That was all the confirmation I needed of their deceit. The abrupt transition from contemplating forgiveness to a resolute decision was disorienting, and I detest feeling humiliated. I could indeed concur that there might be a valid reason for attempting to deceive a lie detector test. There was only one explanation: they tampered with the video. The following moments were tense. Flo let out a loud groan and fled out the door, while Mary sat there, stunned. Alice advanced towards Roger, who attempted to maneuver past me, using me as a shield. I took a single stride and exerted all my force as I brought my foot down on his injured leg. Instinctively, he doubled over, and as his head reached a near horizontal position, it met my knee coming from the opposite direction, causing his head to snap back, blood spraying from his flattened nose. He joined Flo in a hurried flight away from the house, leaving the three of us locked in a grim tableau. Alice stood trembling, tears streaming down her face, a sentiment I could deeply relate to. For the second time in a week, the man I had loved unconditionally for nearly 25 years shattered my heart. The realization that this was the same person who had kept me hopeful between crises was doubly shocking. Mary remained seated, seemingly stunned by her sister's foolishness and likely horrified by the lies Flo undoubtedly fed her over the past week. I approached Alice and enveloped her in a hug. I held her as she trembled uncontrollably, mourning the demise of her marriage. I've always preferred to grieve in solitude, reserving it for later, but in this moment, I remained composed, as clinically calm as one can be amidst chaos, already formulating a list of inquiries. I was already regretting letting Roger depart with only a broken nose. I glanced at Mary, pondering her reasons for staying. Was it to offer apologies for her role in this debacle, or was it due to her inability to tear her gaze away from the catastrophe unfolding before her? Unable to answer this without breaking my connection with Alice, which I had no intention of doing, I allowed my thoughts to race. It became apparent that Roger, while intelligent and adept at manipulation, was not as cunning as Alice. If she hadn't picked up on the sunlight clue at that moment, we might still be part of two successful couples. In hindsight, the doctored video was quite clever, yet I struggled to reconcile this with the fact that I was being deceived. I was certain that the soundtrack aligned perfectly with the words I had heard during that weekend, leading to an inevitable logical conclusion. That certainty neatly fit into a slot in my mind like the penultimate piece of a puzzle. They must have either overlaid the old soundtrack onto new visual footage or replicated the words and sounds in real time. Both scenarios based on recordings made during the original incident. Suddenly, Roger's actions of playing the file through his laptop made sense. After giving Alice one final hug, I gently lowered her onto the couch and made my way to my laptop. I breathed a sigh of relief when I found it hadn't gone into sleep mode yet, which would have required a password to regain access. How silly, I chastised myself inwardly, realizing that if it had, I could have simply viewed the flash drive on another device. My mind was clearly foggy from everything that had transpired. With my fingers deftly navigating the keys and mouse, I closed the software and opened the video file displayed on the Explorer screen, revealing that we had just witnessed myself and Flo making take 8. There were also files labeled 2 through 7. Two more files caught my attention. One was titled Me and Flo Original, while the other was labeled AED Basement. I clicked on the latter, then scrolled along the progress bar. About 3/4 of the way through, I found myself suspended from that cursed bar in the basement, captured by an obviously hidden camera. I closed the clip, overwhelmed by the flood of unpleasant memories. The file labeled Original was significantly larger than the others. Seeing Alice's approving nod, I pressed play. It revealed a view overlooking Roger and Alice's bedroom. The perspective differed from video 8, prompting me to dash down the hallway to compare the two views. After about half a minute of detective work, I deduced that the original camera was likely concealed on a bookshelf, while subsequent versions were probably captured by a tripod-mounted camera at the foot of the bed. Upon returning to the living room, I noted that the timer at the bottom of the screen displayed 1 minute and 5 seconds, with over an hour remaining. It was evident that Roger lacked editing skills. I fast-forwarded to 20 minutes before the end, then progressed in 30-second intervals until the action began. I backtracked 30 seconds and settled onto the sofa beside Alice, clutching her hand for mutual support. Let's just say the original version differed significantly from the subsequent ones. The only commonality was that it all commenced with Flo pushing Roger onto his back. About 25 seconds later, I heard both Alice and Mary gasp simultaneously. Due to the camera angle, Flo's face came into view as she turned her head to the side, glancing down and to the left of the camera. In simpler terms, there was a grate at floor level that opened into a channel carrying the crucial sounds of their prank to the basement below, where I was held captive. The expression on Flo's face, the one that caused the gasps, was repulsive. My wife knew precisely what I endured in the basement that night, and she relished it. My supposedly loving wife took pleasure in mentally tormenting me. I battled a strong urge to vomit. When Roger noticed where Flo's gaze was fixed on the screen, he smirked maliciously. He seemed too stunned to check the time, but a few seconds must have passed. We all observed as Roger turned Flo onto her back, kneeling beside her and fiddling with his belt and trousers. On the screen, Flo lifted her skirt and ripped off her underwear, tossing them aside. The remainder of the video unfolded pretty much as I had imagined it would during my time in the basement. With the benefit of hindsight, Flo's callous enjoyment of the situation likely emboldened Roger and triggered the subsequent chain of events. That being said, if I were a betting man, I'd wager that this was Roger and Flo's first encounter. The video certainly depicted how what began as a relatively innocent situation swiftly spiraled out of control. I was fairly certain that Roger realized he derived pleasure from witnessing someone else humiliated, but it was probable that Flo stumbled upon her kink that day. After the spectacle concluded, Mary inquired about the prospect of a future between Flo and me. Her demeanor suggested she wasn't hopeful. I paused for at least a minute to sort through my emotions. No, not in this lifetime, Mary. Ironically, if Flo had approached me later and explained that it started as a joke but escalated out of control as it appeared in the original video, then perhaps I would have contemplated forgiveness. However, they colluded to rewrite history and outsmart the lie detector test. This level of deceit is beyond what I ever believed she was capable of. It makes me question how well I truly know her. What else has she lied to me about? Moreover, we haven't yet viewed all the workout videos. After her initial slip-up, she returned and engaged in at least one more physical interaction with Roger. How many times did they engage in such activities during these workout sessions? Then there was the expression on her face. I'm sure you noticed it too, Mary. I'm sorry, Mary, but it's over between us. Mary nodded solemnly. Please refrain from publicly shaming her, Jim. It would only embarrass your children. If you provide me with a copy of the video, I'll calmly explain the situation to Mom, Dad, Flo, and even your children if necessary. I nodded and expressed my gratitude. She departed sadly, but with determination in her expression. Alice had already opened the phone book to the legal section. Alice and I comforted each other for weeks. However, it became evident that any relationship is destined for painful memories, and we parted as friends. I was leaving her house late one night, after once again providing her with comfort, when I encountered an enraged Roger in her front yard. How could he ever hope to reconcile with Alice if I was visiting her 5 times a week? What a deluded fool. Glancing around for potential witnesses, I took great satisfaction in breaking his nose once more. I felt a sense of pride in myself. The memory of that sadistic grin on his face just before he destroyed my marriage would have been provocation enough. In the divorce proceedings, Alice practically crucified him. When he demanded his share of the assets, with my full approval, she threatened to press charges for unlawful restraint, using the basement video as evidence. He cut his losses and vanished soon after. That was for the best. I might have been bluffing. I could have likely endured the public humiliation, and I wasn't concerned about Flo's reputation. But I didn't want to embarrass my children or Flo's extended family. Shortly after I gave Roger a bloody nose, about a week after the video incident, Flo reached out, wondering if my decision not to share the video with her kids, family, and friends indicated a chance for us in the future. Her message, which only included one clip, suggested she was unaware that I had seen the original. She likely assumed Roger wouldn't be so careless as to keep all the incriminating evidence in one place. The message also reminded me that I hadn't sent the clips to Mary. I hadn't heard from my children that week, but given their self-absorption, was that really surprising? This also hinted at a lack of communication between Mary and Flo, perhaps due to Mary's anger or Flo's embarrassment. I called Mary to confirm she still wanted the video. She did. It was during that same conversation that I found out Flo had moved back in with her parents. When I burned both Take 8 and the original onto a DVD, I realized I hadn't actually watched Takes 2 through 7, so I did. In doing so, they extinguished every remaining soft or forgiving part of my heart, turning it into unyielding concrete. To say they both lost control would be an understatement. The same look of disgust appeared on their faces as Flo had in the original version. I almost reconsidered and sent the clips to everyone in Flo's address book before I calmed down and thought about how it would impact my children. I tried to find Roger, but he had already skipped town. No, Flo won't be forgiven, and unfortunately, Roger won't get a third broken nose. I sent all the clips to Mary with a warning that if I heard any complaints about how I treated Flo, I'd release the entire video. She must have done a good job because, one by one, Flo's parents, Eric and Patty, called to tell me they understood why my marriage was over. Later on, I discovered that Mary recounted the entire ordeal to them and offered to show the clips as proof. Only Flo's mother took her up on the offer. Struggling to believe the narrative, she apparently became ill halfway through watching the original clip. Following this, Flo didn't contest the divorce. Through Mary, I found out she had found refuge from the toxic environment at her parents' house by renting a small apartment, I wasn't aiming to cheat her in the divorce. 24 solid years had to count for something, and I didn't want any repercussions from my children down the line if and when they eventually forgave their mother. Flo sent me a sincere letter apologizing for her actions and attempted cover-up. The loneliness she expressed leaped off the pages. She pleaded for forgiveness, but more to reconcile with herself. Her appeals for me to forgive her for the sake of her parents, our children, and mutual friends nearly moved me to tears, nearly. I wasn't seeking a replacement yet, but there was no shortage of single women vying for my attention. Ask any middle-aged woman about the availability of suitable, decent-looking men with good morals, and she'll paint a bleak picture. I'm looking forward to meeting new ones, and since I have no intention of marrying again, I anticipate many, many such encounters.
Cheating wife used my travel rewards for an affair trip but forgot to change the reservation contact. My ex-wife, 52 female, and I, 53 male, had been married for 26 years. I'll call my ex Joanne, just for the story's sake. Anyways, beyond those 26 years, Joanne and I have known each other since we were 17. We went to high school together. Well, I went to high school in the opposite part of the town, and she went to the Catholic high school. All we've known is each other. Right out of high school, we decided to travel for a bit and experience a bit of what life had to offer because we knew that we wanted to start a family. And travel might be sort of out of the picture, or at least look different, after we had kids. Now, not only that, but I had come into some money after my grandfather passed away. He had passed down some land to my father, who had then gifted us about a quarter section of the land. When we came back, we built our own place on the land that had been passed down to me, got married, and Joanne quickly got pregnant with the first of our 4 boys. My family comes from a long line of farmers. It's what we do best. I had always known that it was something I was going to end up doing, but it never bothered me. I didn't feel forced into it by any means. It was something that I was interested in and took pride in. I had helped both my grandfather and father on the family farm since I was just a small boy. It was in my blood. Joanne came from a big blue-collar family. Her father was the best heavy-duty mechanic in the county and had spent a lot of time at our farm fixing our equipment. That's actually how we met. She tagged along with her father one day when a piece of equipment had broken down. We caught each other's eye, and the rest was history, as they say. Even though her father was who he was, she had never actually gotten her hands dirty until we built our house on the farm. I don't want to toot my own horn, but at the time, my family was one of the largest dairy producers in the north, and because of that, my family's name was well known and well respected. I remember talking to Joanne and telling her that there wouldn't be much outside of the farm for me. I'd likely be working on it until the day I die, but she claimed she was okay with that. She told me that this was the life she wanted, and that she wanted to be with me, and anything outside of that wasn't a life she wanted to be a part of. And so, she helped me operate the farm up until about 4 years ago. By then, our boys had long been grown men, starting their own families, and were all also helping out on the farm. Around that time, she took up a job with a company similar to Avon, a door-to-door cosmetic marketing scheme of sorts. A friend of hers from out of town had talked her into it. She said she would do really well in something like that because she was so hot and charismatic, and was well known in the area, as she had joined a bunch of councils and boards. These apparently were her friend's words, hot and charismatic. I encouraged her to take the leap and said that she'd do well no matter what she did. After her friend said that, Joanne kept asking me if I thought she was pretty and if she was good-looking. This really felt like it came out of nowhere to me. Joanne had never been the kind of woman to doubt herself, and honestly, Joanne was one of the most beautiful women I had ever laid eyes on. I told her she was beautiful, and I tried to make a habit of saying that to her every day after that. It had gotten me thinking that maybe I hadn't been saying it enough prior to that. It was shortly after that when I noticed Joanne's enthusiasm about the farm started to slip away. She just wasn't interested in it and didn't really ask me about my day anymore or go out of her way to do small chores around the farm. Not that I expected that of her, but it was just usually what she had done. We ended up talking, and she said that she didn't want me to be mad at her for taking on a new job. I told her that I had more than enough help and that she should do what makes her happy. I would never be mad at her for doing something that made her happy. She ended up taking the job and actually doing quite well with the company. Once you sell a certain amount of products, the company actually buys you a vehicle. Not just any vehicle, but one of those fancy schmancy German vehicles. She ended up becoming regional manager, and the company compensated her and her hard work with a free car. I was really proud of her, but as soon as she got the car, I noticed her personality change a bit. She drove around town like her crap didn't stink. And I had to hear about it from the husbands who had heard it from their wives. At first, I just thought it was jealousy. I mean, it's not unheard of in a small town. People don't really like change all that much, or like people flaunting their cash. My wife had always been so modest. She had dressed well, but she didn't dress above her means. She was always a t-shirt and jeans kind of gal. And my wife, in the whole time that I've known her, had never gotten her nails done. But after that car, she started getting her nails done. And she was buying all these high fashion clothes that she'd drive right into the city to get. I mean, I'm not a fashionista by any means. I couldn't tell you one designer from something you'd get at Walmart. But the clothes she was wearing were racking up the visa. Not that she wasn't paying it down, but I knew the amount that she was spending on the clothes when the bills would come in, and it was more than she had ever spent on clothes in about 5 or so years. I tried to be supportive. She told me that this job was about image and standard. She said no one was going to take her seriously selling ladies' makeup and cosmetics when she was looking like she came off the farm. The way she explained it did make sense to me at the time. I thought, hey, who am I to tell her what she can and can't do with her money? Anyways, the job allowed her to travel and work from home. The money she was bringing in allowed us to take trips here and there, but nothing too crazy. I mean, we weren't a Disneyland family. We had been to the Grand Canyon and the Joshua Tree, but nothing far beyond that. When she traveled all over for conferences and meetings and whatnot, she'd go to Miami, Las Vegas, San Francisco, and New Orleans, just to name a few. I mean, big enough cities that they seemed a bit overwhelming to a redneck like me. But when Joanne would come back home, she'd be full of life, and it was so great to see her fresh and revitalized. I honestly felt really happy for her. Now, I can't remember exactly when this was, but I think it might have been around November, when she came to me and told me that there was a man, I'll call him Dom, who had recently started with the company. I thought it was weird to have a man in there selling ladies' makeup and what have you when the company was primarily women, but I thought, hey, times are changing. She said that he was a sales director and wasn't actually selling the products himself, but that they had brought him in to expand the company. She said that he had come up with this big idea to compensate those who had made the top sales of the year with a trip to Mexico in February. I thought, sweet, we're going to Mexico. Both of us have never been. Then she breaks the news to me that it's only for people in the company and friends and family aren't allowed. I was like, that's bizarre, but I thought that since it was the farthest they've ever gone for something like that, it made sense that they couldn't afford to offer the trip to family as well. Family has been invited out to other things before this, but nothing as extravagant as Mexico. So, surprise, surprise, Joanne ends up being the top saleswoman in her region, and because of that, she was rewarded with this trip to Mexico. Apparently, she was 1 out of 10 ladies, plus a few regional directors and top folk in the company, including Dom. February pops up, she goes on this trip. I hardly hear from her in the time that she's gone, but this isn't out of the ordinary when she's away for work. I also told her to go and relax and have fun, so I wasn't hurt or anything when I didn't hear from her because I knew she was trying to unplug. I go to pick her up at the airport when she gets back, and on the drive home, all I hear is Dom this and Dom that. Apparently, he's 43, never been married, he's from Los Angeles, and works remotely. She said that this was the first time she actually met him in person. She said that he used to work as a car salesman. Apparently, he was tall, dark, and handsome and knew how to dress himself. She admires how driven he is, and he really listens to her and what she has to say. Plus, he's incredibly charming. And they just drank at the poolside bar and played beach volleyball the whole time. I didn't want to seem against it all, but the way she was talking about him really rubbed me the wrong way. On one hand, I knew that she was happy and having fun, and I was proud of her professional growth. But on the other hand, just the way she was talking about him made me uneasy. Something just seemed too beyond professional about it. Then again, I wasn't used to Joanne really working. Not that working on the farm wasn't working, but we worked side by side with each other. I thought that maybe those feelings I was having were just jealousy, since I hadn't actually seen her work in a type of environment that wasn't on the farm, like a corporate type environment. Fast forward a bit to April. I came inside to find this package on her kitchen table. It's addressed to Joanne, and I see that the sender says Dom. I decide to leave it there and see if my wife says anything about receiving something from him. At dinner, I see that she's wearing this new fancy watch that I don't recall seeing her purchase herself. Usually, she's pretty keen on showing off what she's bought. I ask her about the watch, and she says that it just came in today and it's a gift from her company for all of her hard work. I asked her if it was from anyone in particular from her company, and she said nope, just a group thank you. I didn't question any further, but I knew she was lying. I knew it had nothing to do with the work because her company usually sends things like that in company-branded wrapping or letterhead. This straight up looked like Dom had packed it personally. Later that night, we were laying in bed and I decided to ask her, "Are you attracted to Dom?" She acted shocked and offended that I'd even asked such a question. She said, "Of course not," and said that I'm the only man that she's ever been attracted to. I wasn't really convinced by this and told her that I didn't feel comfortable with the relationship she had with Dom. Well, you can imagine that started a huge fight. She started to talk about how there was nothing between them, and that I was just jealous that she's doing well for herself and it has nothing to do with me or the farm. And that I'm mad at her for not working on the farm anymore. I stood my ground and told her that it didn't have anything to do with the fact that she wasn't working on the farm anymore. I said that I didn't trust Dom and his intentions. I told her that I knew that the watch was from Dom. I said, "Imagine if someone was sending me gifts like that, and I was keeping it a secret from you. And she's like, but I'm not lying. I told you it was from the company as a gift for the sales that I'm making and the records I'm breaking within the company. She said, if I was breaking records, then she'd hope I was getting properly compensated too. Needless to say, I ended up sleeping in the spare room. The next day, she talks to me as if nothing happened the night before. She tries to butter me up, give me a kiss, and squeezes me, slaps my butt, and tells me that she misses me. No apology, though. She's like, we should take a trip together to get back on track. I'm like, okay, sure. And it did seem a bit hopeful at first until she said that she has to take a work trip this upcoming weekend. And then we'd talk details when she gets back. I'm immediately suspicious. I ask her where she's going and why she didn't bring this up before. She told me Nashville, and that she totally forgot to tell me, but it was an important one not to miss. I asked her if there's anyone she's going to see specifically, and she asked me what I meant by that, and she says it's for training and that the majority of the company will be going, it's mandatory. She said it's only for 3 days. There was no way I was going to give her the benefit of the doubt at that point. It was just too coincidental. I asked her where she was staying and where it was at, and she told me the Hyatt House. So, she goes on this trip. It's Saturday morning, and everything is business as usual for me at home, but then I get this call. It turns out to be an Emma from the Hyatt Regency in Phoenix, Arizona. I'm thinking, why would someone from the Hyatt in Phoenix be contacting me? She tells me there's a slight issue with the room reservation under Joanne Blank. She said there were some discrepancies with the payment method, and she wanted to confirm the details with me. She said the payment information on file didn't match the cardholder's name, and she wanted me to verify the card details right away. The red flags are raised. I ask if anyone else is listed under the reservation or if there's been any guest added to the room. She's quiet for a bit and then says, it looks like there's another guest registered to the room, Mr. Dominic Blank. Is that correct, sir? And I'm like, actually no, that's not correct. I'm like, can you tell me if they're both checked in right now? She goes, yes, both guests checked in yesterday evening. I decide not to blow my top and give her my credit card, and the conversation ends. I immediately texted Joanne. Just received a call from the hotel. Why is Dom checked in with you? We need to talk now. She texts me back, it's a work thing. He's here for the same training, nothing to worry about. I'll explain when I get back. I'm fuming at this point. She tries to text me again later that night and she says, thinking of you, miss you, and all that, but I'm not responding. She even tried to call me, but didn't leave a message. I actually texted my brother and asked him to come over. We sat on the porch, and I told him what's been happening. He says he knows a guy who can help me and get papers sorted if that's what I really want to do. I ended up emailing the guy just to set up an appointment to see what that might look like. But since it was Saturday, I wasn't expecting a response back. Anyways, she comes home on Sunday afternoon and my brother is still there. She got her friend to drop her off. She goes to hug me, but I push her away, and I'm like, care to explain why Dom was checked into your room? She said there was a mix-up with the reservation, and he had nowhere else to stay. Then I asked her how Nashville was. She tells me that it was beautiful weather, and the food there was great. I'm like, that's interesting, considering you were staying in Phoenix. She tries to act dumb, and then I tell her that the hotel called me because there was an issue with the payment. And that's how I found out about her and Dom. She told me, it's not what you think. I tell her that it looks exactly how it is, and that she's been lying to me. I said she was dumb enough to not change the contact information on the travel rewards, so they instantly contacted me when there were issues with the payment. She tries to deny it and says that she got the conference city mixed up when she first told me, and that it was actually in Phoenix. I wasn't having any of it. Then she literally goes into hysterics and starts crying and telling me that it was just the once, and it was a huge mistake. She's trying to hug me, and my brother literally has to rip her off me. Then he tells Joanne that she better pack more stuff in that bag of hers and get her friend to pick her back up and stay somewhere else for a while. Interestingly enough, she actually listens to him, and she leaves the house. My brother stays with me that night, and we get into some drinking and go over a game plan on my next moves. After that, we did some investigating and found out that Dom was actually married with 2 kids. And because I had a few drinks in my system, I messaged his wife and told her that her husband was cheating on her with my wife. I told her everything I knew about the hotel and the gift he bought for her. I wake up to Joanne trying to get into the house, and she's shouting at me that she can't believe I'd stoop so low to spread about her. Then I tell her to quit the act because I knew she's seeing Dom. She tries crocodile tears, but I literally tell her I don't believe a word she says. I tell her that she's better off just telling me the truth now. Then she says that she was so severely unhappy for all those years. She said she hated working on the farm, and she's just been living this lie. She said she started this job and then met Dom, and everything just changed for her. She said she finally felt free and like herself, and she finally felt beautiful and loved and desired. Then she starts insulting me, calling me a dirty, stupid pig. I asked her if she hated our life together so much, why she stuck around. And she said that she thought it would get better, or that she would be able to travel more and do fancy things, but that I was just such a cheap bastard. I told her that I never held her back from anything, and we could have traveled if she wanted to and could have gone for fancy dinners, but she never said a word to me. I told her if she would have just said something to me, we might have had a chance, and she said, "Had a chance?" And that's when I told her that I contacted a divorce lawyer. Then she starts begging me for forgiveness and really starts crying. She said she didn't mean it. She said she doesn't know what came over her. She just liked the way he looked at her. I said, "I've been looking at you like that since we were 17, but you were too blind to see." I told her to get out of the house, and she eventually did after I threatened to call her father. Well, then fast forward to the divorce. Obviously, I had a lot more to my name than she did, so that meant I had a lot more to lose, but thankfully, I was able to spend that money on a good lawyer. Which he was. He was fantastic. My brother really pulled through. By the time the divorce was over, I had everything that I wanted. I kept the house, the farm, and the business. I sold her back her shares of the business and a few acres of land that I really didn't need. I don't really know what ended up happening with Dom. His account ended up going private, so I couldn't see what was going on in his life. But based on the pictures on his wife's account, she's his ex-wife now. All the pictures of him that were once there are now deleted. My brother and my boys really supported me through all of this. They weren't too impressed that their mother cheated on me, and it made family get-togethers a bit awkward for a little while until she eventually just stopped showing up to save face. Anyways, I'm moving on, and life on the farm is thriving. Business is good. Like I said, I'll be here until the day I die, but I'm very okay with that. Here's to the future. Well, it sounds like Joanne's journey from the farm to the glamorous world of cosmetics took quite a turn through Heartbreak Highway. From fixing machinery to diving into corporate life, she traded her farm boots for high heels and found herself entangled in a web of betrayal and fancy cars. Dom, the slick salesman, turned out to be more trouble than he was worth, leaving behind a trail of broken hearts and deleted social media profiles. Meanwhile, you weathered the storm with the support of your boys and a savvy lawyer, securing the farm, the business, and your peace of mind. While Joanne chased dreams of city lights and scandalous vacations, you held steady in the fields, where honesty and hard work still count for something real. Here's to a future free of drama and full of fertile soil, where the only surprises come from Mother Nature, not wayward spouses. You've earned it, my friend. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and thank you for joining us today. Be sure to like and subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on your next video. See you next time!
Today marks my birthday, a special occasion we usually celebrate with a barbecue. It's our tradition to invite close family, friends, and familiar neighbors. However, this year, the event seemed a bit out of the ordinary and quite extravagant. To handle the large amount of food, we bought extra grills and smokehouses. Even though it was my special day, I took on most of the cooking duties. I'll admit my cooking skills aren't exceptional, but the end result met our expectations. Being the cook had its perks, like always having a cold beer in my left hand to keep me refreshed while I tirelessly grilled the meat. Now the question was whether I wanted my birthday present immediately or if I'd prefer to wait until the evening to find out. A warm shower was prepared for me, and Amelia, with a broad smile, greeted me from the bathroom doorway. She mentioned she'd see me tonight. I decided to head downstairs to assist the boys, as Alvin, our 18-year-old son, was getting ready to leave for Texas, followed by Louis, who was a year younger, but already had a scholarship at Auburn. They were great sons, and I credited their upbringing to Amelia's efforts. My main role was to provide them with a comfortable home to grow up in. I was proud of instilling in them a strong work ethic, but I couldn't help but wish I had been a more understanding father. Throughout their upbringing, we spent a lot of time in the yard and on the terrace, making sure everything was in perfect condition. Then we fired up some grills, starting with the ribs in the smokehouse. While burgers, hot dogs, and steaks were straightforward, the ribs required extra care. Alvin expertly managed the smokehouse, and Louis diligently seasoned the meat. Things were going so smoothly that I could almost relax and let them handle everything. Amelia arrived just in time to join us after our preparations. Her two sisters also came to help with additional tasks. We had over 50 guests, so it was a big celebration. It always amuses me how friends appear magically when there's free food. Despite hitting 40, I still felt like a 20-year-old at heart. Next month, Amelia and I will celebrate our 20th wedding anniversary, a testament to the strength of our marriage. Our journey together has been eventful and fulfilling. Our love life may not be as passionate as before, but it's still enjoyable. About a year ago, Amelia started working, and our relationship seemed to cool. The idea of an empty nest seemed to draw her out of the house, and as long as she found financial happiness, I was content. We didn't really need the extra income, but Amelia craved the companionship her job provided. After working in the yard, the boys and I went for a shower. I even had a new shirt that my mother had brought earlier in the week. It might not have been my style, but wearing it was a duty I couldn't refuse. To be honest, I felt like I looked like a Hawaiian pimp in those clothes. Amelia made a wise call by insisting I wear an apron, which turned out to be a practical addition to my outfit. Soon, the guests started arriving with delicious dishes, thoughtful gifts, and soft drinks. The weather was perfect, promising a great day. Amelia, as always, looked stunning and effortlessly played the role of the perfect hostess. Approaching 40 next year, she still maintained her youthful appearance, looking no older than 30. I eagerly looked forward to some exotic weekends and memorable vacations with Amelia. It was a chance for us to create cherished memories and recharge. After years of dedicated parenting, I watched Amelia gracefully move among the tables, ensuring everything was perfectly placed. She embodied the essence of an ideal wife and mother, making me proud. What more could a man ask for? Soon, everyone gathered to enjoy the feast. Plates of delicious food appeared and disappeared throughout the yard. Thankfully, most guests brought their own chairs, avoiding any seating issues. We had coolers filled with drinks, one with cold beer and the other with soda for those who preferred non-alcoholic options. The cake, safely tucked away in the kitchen, patiently awaited its moment. In the midst of the crowd, there was someone unfamiliar to me, and I couldn't figure out where he came from. His face didn't ring a bell. A tall figure in a dark blue jacket stood in front of us, stopping at the edge of the party area to exchange a few words with a neighbor. The neighbor called Amelia over, and he thanked her, handing her an envelope from his jacket. Amelia received the envelope with a solemn expression, and the man made a brief statement. Then he left as inconspicuously as he arrived, leaving everyone in suspense. Amelia froze in place, her expression blank. After a quick glance in my direction, she retreated into the house. I stood there, silently observing the situation. The lively chatter of the guests turned into hushed murmurs and whispers, trying to break the tension in the air. Feeling the need to break the spell of the moment, I raised my voice and announced that anyone who wanted more ribs should help themselves. After a few moments, Alvin and Louis cautiously approached me, trying to make sense of the situation. Louis asked what was going on, and I could only shrug in response. Alvin started heading to the house, but I reached out, touched his shoulder, and signaled for him to stop, shaking my head. I suggested he check if we needed more drinks or beer, hoping to divert their attention for a while. When the conversations in the courtyard slowly returned to normal, I felt a bit of relief. However, after 10 minutes, I realized it was time to talk to my wife. But before I could gather my thoughts, Louis urgently jumped into the conversation, his voice filled with concern. He informed me that Mom was leaving in a Mustang. Louis directed my attention to the front of the house, and I saw my black Mustang convertible racing down the street at a frightening speed. As everyone in the backyard turned their gaze to this scene, silence fell over the once lively atmosphere. It was strange to see Amelia driving a Mustang. She typically drove a minivan, but in her absence, the Mustang seemed like the preferred choice. After Amelia's sudden departure, many questions remained, but I knew they would have to wait until she returned home. Unfortunately, things took a turn for the worse. Amelia's sister Lily showed up with a cake, and I made a feeble attempt to show some happiness. However, her absence cast a gloomy shadow over the previously joyful atmosphere. One by one, friends and neighbors bid us goodbye and headed home. Close family stayed a bit longer, but eventually, all the chores were completed, and there was nothing more to tidy up. Regrettably, Amelia's abrupt departure remained an untouched subject of conversation. It seemed like everyone was deliberately avoiding discussing it, trying to preserve a sense of normality. Now, left alone in the house with my two sons, silence enveloped us. They looked at me, searching for some sign or explanation, but I had nothing to offer. Sitting on the couch, I remained alone when they retired to their bedrooms for the night, and when morning came, I was still sitting there. Alvin and Louis got up early, wasting no time returning borrowed grills and other equipment to our kind neighbors. The smell of freshly brewed coffee tempted me to rise from the couch, but Amelia's absence continued to trouble me. Whatever was in the envelope, it must have been very important for her to leave so suddenly. I made several attempts to reach her by phone, but her phone was naturally turned off. I spent most of the night awake, tormented by thoughts, trying to decipher the truth behind the situation. After returning the borrowed items, Alvin and Louis sensed my need for privacy and left. I appreciated their understanding. Seeking solace, I took a long hot shower in the hope that it might ease the situation, but sadly, the relief was short-lived. Realizing that it was Sunday, I knew there wasn't much I could do in the current situation. However, I decided to consider seeking help from the police. While I didn't personally know any officers or detectives, I had a few acquaintances at the courthouse I could turn to. Perhaps they could offer guidance or assistance in this difficult situation. In our financial arrangement, Amelia and I shared one credit card and one debit card. The debit card covered our daily expenses, while the credit card was primarily for larger purchases. We aimed to pay off both cards in full each month. If Amelia ran into trouble, she probably had to use these cards. Credit card transactions typically appeared in our bank statement after a few days, but debit card expenses were immediately noticeable. After a few hours, growing concerned, I decided to check our credit card first. However, after a thorough examination, I found no signs of unusual or unauthorized activity. Debit card transactions, on the other hand, told a different story. About 2 hours after Amelia's departure, she made a gasoline purchase in Pennsylvania near the Ohio state line. 2 hours later, another fuel purchase was made in Illinois. The last recorded transaction occurred at an ATM in Cedar Rapids, where she withdrew $300 in cash. As I sat, sipping my third cup of coffee, a harsh reality became apparent. Amelia wasn't planning to return. She wasn't just taking some time to think. She was actively fleeing from something. While I loved my wife and didn't wish her something bad, I couldn't unconditionally support her actions. My heart was filled with a mix of emotions as I realized that our relationship stood at a critical juncture. Even though it was Sunday, I swiftly canceled both cards within just 10 minutes. About an hour later, I went to the police, reporting the theft of my Mustang, but choosing not to mention that my wife took it. Instead, I reported a gasoline card inside the car that was used in 3 states, indicating a westward direction. Although I felt guilty for not disclosing the full truth, it seemed like the only way to get their attention. Unfortunately, they appeared more interested in dismissing me than in thoroughly investigating the circumstances. Following these calls, I conducted a quick inventory of the house to see what was missing and if anything was out of the ordinary. Upon closer inspection, I noticed that only Amelia's purse and a small overnight bag were gone from our house. I couldn't help but wonder what she had packed in there, making her departure even more mysterious. For several hours, I debated what to do with her mobile phone. Since I had already taken the initiative to cancel the cards, I hoped that its absence would compel her to get in touch and provide an explanation for her actions. Lost in thought, I completely missed lunchtime before I realized it. It was time for dinner, and my sons brought a couple of pizzas. Despite having plenty of leftovers from the previous day, I had to admit that the hot, salty slices tasted quite good. Ultimately, we gathered to discuss the unfolding events. I shared all the information I had with Alvin and Louis, and they provided unwavering support. That night I found some solace in sleeping in my own bed. However, after a few hours, it became evident that Amelia had no intention of making contact. Meanwhile, Alvin and Louis had started working at a local tree pruning company for the summer. It was hard work, but they embraced the challenge and relished the sense of responsibility that came with their new job. As they left in the Jeep, I stood on the porch and waved goodbye with a heavy heart. After finishing my coffee, I aimlessly wandered through the empty house, still grappling with the end of our relationship and searching for answers that remained elusive. In the end, I made the decision to contact my workplace and request a week off to give myself time to sort out the situation and seek some clarity. Working as a driver, delivering gravel to a local quarry had become monotonous amidst all the chaos. Despite the decent pay, the physical labor was tough. I'd be sweaty and covered in dirt, but at least I didn't have to make decisions. I'd simply load up the cargo, drop it off, and get paid. In the earlier days of Amelia's job at Prescott Casualty Company, we used to attend various company events together. These social gatherings included parties and picnics, which allowed me to meet some of her colleagues. However, in the past 6 months, it dawned on me that we'd completely stopped going to such events. Amelia never mentioned them, and they didn't seem important to her anymore. Although I wasn't great at remembering people I'd met, I did recall Jack and Margie Gilson. Jack was a skilled carpenter, and Margie worked in the same office as Amelia at Prescott Casualty Company. Realizing I needed answers, I decided to call the company. I greeted Margie over the phone, introducing myself as Liam Connor, and asking if she had a moment to chat. Margie responded, appearing overwhelmed with work. She mentioned that she was really busy at the moment and hoped it wasn't something urgent. I hesitated before inquiring, asking if Amelia hadn't come to work today. Margie's response took me by surprise. She informed me that they didn't expect her to show up. Curious, I probed further, asking why that was. There was a long silence on the other end of the line, and I started feeling uneasy. It was clear that Margie was uncomfortable talking to me. She hesitantly replied that she didn't think she should discuss this with me and suggested I should talk to my wife. Disappointment welled up in me, and I confessed that I'd love to, but I had no idea where she was. After another long pause, Margie quickly added that she was sorry, but had a lot of work to do and had to go. Without giving me a chance to say anything else, she abruptly ended the conversation, leaving me bewildered. At that moment, I had a sinking feeling that something was amiss at Prescott Casualty, and Amelia was deliberately keeping it from me. Everything suddenly made sense. The reason we'd stopped attending company events was clear. Amelia was afraid that someone might inadvertently reveal her secrets or arouse my suspicions about her involvement in something shady. Contemplating the situation, I grabbed a cold beer and went out onto the porch, seeking some solace and a chance to collect my thoughts. Looking back, I can now say that over the past few months, there were several occurrences that caught my attention. However, at the time, I didn't pay them much mind. One significant change was Amelia's increased overtime work. Initially, this didn't raise major concerns, as it wasn't a reason for alarm, but it had now become a regular occurrence, taking on a different significance. In light of recent events, it struck me that Amelia had gradually stopped discussing her work when she was at home, and we had intentionally distanced ourselves from contact with her coworkers. Despite these changes, I noticed she hadn't altered her appearance or clothing style. There had been no recent purchases of new clothes or fashionable attire. Additionally, I couldn't recall any suspicious phone calls or emails that might have raised doubts. Given the trust I had in my wife, there seemed to be no grounds to question her actions or behavior at home. Amelia remained kind and loving, and our romantic connection remained strong. But despite my growing unease, I realized it was time to seek further assistance. I thought of Donald Curry, an old school friend who worked in the courthouse and had some computer expertise. Though I wasn't entirely sure about his specific role, I knew he dealt with computers to some extent. I got in touch with Donald, explained the situation, and sought his opinion. We agreed to meet in person at the glass door when he finished work to discuss the issue and hopefully find a solution together. Before hitting the road, I decided to call Ron Will Home Builders and discovered that Jack Gilson, a colleague of Amelia's, was currently working on a nearby project, constructing an apartment complex. I decided to visit him at noon, right after lunch. I usually had no trouble finishing my Taco Bell burrito, but today, I could only manage to eat half of it. I was too preoccupied with the thought of talking to Jack. Upon arriving at the construction site, I noticed that the crew was still on their lunch break. A sense of anticipation washed over me as Jack spotted me, and with a warm, welcoming smile, approached my car. His demeanor felt much more friendly than Margie's, which somewhat alleviated my anxiety. Jack greeted me warmly and mentioned that it was good to see me. He assumed I wanted to talk about Amelia, and I nodded in agreement, explaining that I had spoken to Margie today, but she wouldn't share any information I needed to know. I suggested that we discuss it man to man, with no nonsense. I appreciated Jack's straightforward approach, but I also knew that if he attempted to deceive me or withhold crucial information, my patience would quickly wear thin. Jack began seriously, explaining that he usually tuned Margie out when she started talking about work. He shared what he could, stating that Amelia had been involved with a married man from the office for nearly 6 months. They had tried to keep it a secret, but rumors spread like wildfire. Margie and the other ladies found out, and things started to change. They noticed my absence from company events, and many of them suspected that Amelia was deliberately keeping me away. With regret, Jack continued, apologizing that he couldn't provide more information. Regarding the guy's identity, he admitted he didn't pay much attention to these matters, but offered to find out if I wanted. Appreciating Jack's offer to help, I responded by telling him not to worry about it. I would figure it out myself, and thanked him for sharing what he knew. The new details from Jack painted a clear picture of the situation, leaving no room for misunderstanding. I had overlooked what was happening right in my own home. Annoyed and hurt, I promptly disconnected Amelia's mobile phone to prevent her from contacting our house. As I headed back to the house, the phone rang. It was a call from the Cedar Rapids police. They informed me that they had found Amelia's Mustang in the bus station parking lot. It had been towed to the impound lot, and I could retrieve it at any time, provided I paid a $300 fee. Deciding to gather more information, I made a stop at the police station before picking up the car. At the police station, I received a report about Amelia's abandoned car. The information indicated that she left the car and chose to continue her journey by bus. I couldn't pinpoint her destination, but I suspected it might be westerly, although I wasn't aware of her connections in that area. To safeguard myself and my children, I took the initiative to visit the bank. We closed all our joint accounts and opened new ones in my name only. Additionally, I reviewed the beneficiary designations in the insurance policies, ensuring that my boys were the recipients. With mixed emotions, I arrived early in the morning at the arranged meeting spot, the glass door, where I intended to meet Donald. However, preoccupied with the gravity of the situation, I had consumed too much drinks before his arrival. Donald began by explaining that there was a divorce hearing that day and Amelia was supposed to testify, but she didn't show up. He told me that Marcia Ridgway was seeking a divorce from her husband, Kelsey, and she wanted Amelia to testify that it was with her that her husband had committed something. Without Amelia's testimony, the divorce couldn't proceed. I absorbed this information, realizing that everything was unfolding as planned. It appeared that Marcia Ridgway had substantial evidence to support her claims, including photos, videos, and recorded phone conversations. Consequently, she didn't really rely on Amelia's confession. It seemed that Amelia's call was designed to humiliate her, and it appeared to have achieved its intended effect. Now, it seemed no one cared about Amelia's situation anymore. She had nothing new to offer, and her circumstances were no longer of concern. Kelsey Ridgway had, in fact, confessed to everything as soon as his wife's lawyer presented evidence, leading to the judge's immediate decision to grant the divorce. The divorce would be finalized in 6 months. Kelsey faced substantial financial consequences, as he would have to pay significant child support and alimony, given that he had 3 children, all under 10 years old. This mistake would likely have long-term financial implications. After a lengthy discussion with Donald, he took his leave. Expressing his desire to return home to his family, I thanked him for his assistance, and turning to the bartender, requested a cup of coffee. Initially, I considered grabbing one of the red pickled eggs from the jar on the counter, but then I remembered the leftovers from the party. Despite having consumed a bit more drink than I should have, I managed to get home without endangering myself or others. Upon reflection, I acknowledged it had been an unwise decision. As a result, I started wrapping 6 ribs in foil. After placing the ribs in the oven, I decided to take a shower. When I returned to the kitchen, only bones remained. Alvin and Lewis had devoured the pork as soon as they got home. They teased me playfully until I took a second portion out of the oven. Alvin seemed particularly excited about the situation with the Mustang. After a 20-minute conversation, I finally agreed and allowed both boys to take the bus to Cedar Rapids and then drive the car home. I allocated them $600 to cover the expenses. Louis adeptly drafted a document on the computer, authorizing them to pick up and drive the car home. Impressed by his competence, I chose to remain silent and signed the document. The next morning, we had breakfast together at IHOP before I dropped them off at the bus station. I couldn't help but chuckle as they boarded the bus, unsure of what to expect during a 2-day Greyhound bus journey. It was a valuable life lesson. To ensure a smooth arrival, I took the initiative and informed the Cedar Rapids Police Department about their impending arrival. After ensuring that everything would proceed smoothly, I turned my attention to the final task that required my attention. Locating Kelsey Ridgway's office took some time. When Margie spotted me, her hand instinctively reached for the phone. However, time was not on her side. Without bothering to introduce myself, I began to execute my plan. Guards swiftly intervened and escorted me away before I had a chance to grasp the situation. A short while later, I found myself at the police station, facing a judge who wasted no time in sentencing me to county jail. There was no trial. The exchange between me and the judge was brief. I was sentenced to 60 days in jail, but to be honest, I didn't care. This was my first opportunity to break free. I called the guys to update them on the situation. I could have sworn I heard Lewis giggling on the other end of the line. Leaving the house unattended for a few days may seem trouble-free, but reality often differs from TV. I had to stay vigilant constantly. Most of the prisoners were uncooperative and had no intentions of becoming friends. Plus, there were plenty of noisy and foolish young people around. Surprisingly, there wasn't much interaction between the younger prisoners and the more violent ones. There was no option for a separate room, so I had to share a cell with a guy named Gioconda. I wasn't aware of my brother's fate. He had found his wife with another man and had been rude with her. But Jocko and I managed to get along well during our time together. I took the top bunk in our cell. The food in the dining room focused heavily on carbohydrates, which I didn't particularly like. Thankfully, Jocko was willing to help by removing the excess portions. He turned out to be the ideal roommate. 3 days later, Louie and Alvin came to visit me. They said the car evacuation trip had been uneventful, but expressed reluctance about traveling by bus again anytime soon. Unfortunately, they had no information on Kelsey's whereabouts or current situation. Regrettably, Louie and Alvin couldn't provide any new information about their mother's whereabouts, but they brought 2 boxes of cigarettes as a gift. Even though Alvin didn't smoke, he believed the cigarettes might have value for trade, likely influenced by watching too many movies. Jocko, on the other hand, was thrilled when I gave him the cigarettes. He explained that smoking helped him deal with weight gain during his prison stay. It appeared that in my absence, leaving the boys alone at home didn't pose any worries. Alvin, being the responsible one, left for college. A week before my release from prison, he took the minivan with him, leaving the Jeep for Lewis to use when I returned home. Lewis and I had lunch at the Red Lobster restaurant. He was excited because he was entering his last year of school. Unfortunately, he would have to tackle issues without my presence. I had other plans. The following morning, as I walked past Margie's desk, she looked completely stunned. Her eyes couldn't believe what they were seeing. With a sly wink at Margie, I confidently entered Kelsey's office, but my triumphant return was short-lived. Just 3 hours later, I was back on the bus, heading to the familiar county jail walls, this time with a 6-month sentence. Despite this turn of events, Lewis found a humorous side to the situation and wasted no time calling his brother at College Station to share the news. Jocko, my reliable cellmate, welcomed me back with open arms. I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction that I had managed to get to Kelsey even more effectively this time. I couldn't deny the possibility that I had truly made an impact this time. Unfortunately, I never received any feedback, which left me unable to determine the outcome of my actions accurately. As expected, I lost my job, which came as no surprise. Fortunately, I had enough money to cover the mortgage and daily expenses. Lewis handled it all efficiently without running into any issues. Besides Lewis's unwavering support, I received regular visits from other family members. Lewis always made sure I had a steady supply of cigarettes for Jocko. Amelia's sisters also expressed their sympathy during the visits, and none of the family members displayed any signs of discontent or disapproval. It had been a while since I heard from Amelia, but strangely enough, we managed to have family celebrations for Thanksgiving and Christmas within the prison walls. But less than a month after Jocko, my dependable cellmate, left, it wouldn't be entirely accurate to say I lost him since he was released before me. Unfortunately, Jocko found himself in a tough spot. His wife and brother had already moved to Florida, and he wasn't sure what to do next. Lewis saw this as an opportunity and suggested it would be great to invite Jocko to stay with us until he found his footing. Lewis kindly offered to help Jocko secure a job at a tree pruning company, but Jocko had already made up his mind to move to a warmer climate in the South. likely considering Florida. Interestingly, on the night before Jocko's departure, an unusual incident occurred. Kelsey Ridgway was found in the city center alley, claiming she was attacked by an unknown person. The funny thing was that I had a solid alibi with Jocko himself. Upon my release from prison, I decided I had exacted enough revenge on Kelsey, especially since he had already moved away from the area and I had no interest in pursuing him further. I decided to enroll in a course to learn how to drive large trucks, which I found relatively easy compared to driving dump trucks, which I was already familiar with. Since I had to wait a few months for Lewis to start his studies at Auburn, I used this time to repair and spruce up our house, though I contemplated selling it. However, the bureaucratic complexities associated with transferring ownership solely to my name deterred me from pursuing that path. Since Amelia's departure, she remained completely silent, providing no information about her whereabouts. Lewis seized the opportunity to take the Mustang with him to Alabama, given its allure to the opposite gender. Although it didn't appeal to me personally, I acknowledged that I was no longer as young and attractive as he was. In the end, I managed to find a couple willing to purchase the house, despite the shadows hanging over its history. Though I wasn't entirely sure about the lawyer's statement, the couple struck a good deal on the house's price. The lawyer assured them that Amelia's signature wasn't necessary, and I saw no reason to disagree. All I wanted was a clean break from the property without complications. I used the down payment from selling the house to invest in a drilling rig equipped with a sleeping area. Before I knew it, I was on the open road, finally experiencing a sense of freedom. Surprisingly, I never had the desire to divorce Amelia. It didn't appeal to me because I had no intention of getting married again. During my time in prison, I realized that opportunities to connect with interesting women were quite limited, and Yoko's influence didn't allow me to consider other options. Interestingly, it seemed that Amelia wasn't interested in getting a divorce either. Since I didn't receive any divorce papers, finding a job wasn't difficult for me. Fortunately, I wasn't in desperate need of money, so I could be selective about the loads I transported. I tried to avoid carrying anything frozen, live, toxic, or explosive. Additionally, I steered clear of winter trips north of the Mason-Dixon line. Adjusting to the nuances of trucking didn't take long, and to my surprise, I found that I genuinely enjoyed my new life. During one of my trips to South Dakota with a load of agricultural equipment, things took an interesting turn. Luckily, it was June, so the weather was cooperative. After delivering the cargo, I continued my journey south, taking a detour off I-90 for about 5 miles until I stumbled upon an establishment called Belly Up. Despite its unassuming exterior, the parking lot was bustling with large trucks and cars. Intrigued, I decided to make a pit stop and check it out. To my delight, I discovered that the diner served breakfast all day, and the portions were not only generous, but also incredibly tasty. While most of the customers were locals, it was clear that some truckers had found their way to this hidden gem. Eager to see what the diner had to offer, I promptly ordered my favorite dish, along with a cup of coffee. As I settled into my seat, I noticed 3 widescreen TVs scattered throughout the place, each displaying various programs that didn't seem to grab much attention from the patrons. The screen nearest to me was showing a lot of political content, and one video in particular caught my eye. It featured a charismatic candidate named Robert, who exuded confidence with his striking silver hair. To my great surprise, a woman stood beside Robert, dressed remarkably like Jackie Kennedy, wearing a big smile. It was none other than Amelia, my Amelia. Before I could fully absorb this unexpected sight, my focus was diverted by the arrival of the most colossal plate of potatoes I had ever seen. Betsy, the waitress, placed it in front of me, playfully quipping that it was for me and inquired if I needed Tabasco. Amusingly, the Tabasco bottle was cleverly concealed behind the pepper shaker, which made Betsy giggle when she playfully revealed its hiding spot and doused my potatoes with it. Intrigued, I asked Betsy about the woman standing next to this chatterbox. She chuckled and explained that she was Robert's new arm candy. Rumors suggested that Robert needed his wife to support his political ambitions and perhaps counter speculations about his orientation. As I liberally applied Tabasco to my potatoes, I couldn't help but comment that she seemed to have aged a bit to be considered arm candy. But in a time crunch, one can't afford to be too picky. I also mentioned my belief that older women often make more fulfilling romantic partners and asked Betsy if she agreed. Observing the woman's appearance, I couldn't help but admire her transformation. Her once blonde hair had acquired an elegant light brown shade, as if she had just left a high-end salon. Impeccable makeup accentuated her features, and her perfectly tailored suit flattered her figure. Shifting my attention away from the TV, I realized that Betsy had returned to her duties. Likely because the potatoes were exceptional, the diner was bustling, and the full parking lot attested to its popularity. She refilled my coffee cup twice as I savored my delicious meal, leaving no trace of leftovers on the plate. Despite the tempting dessert options, my satisfied stomach had no room for more indulgence. Betsy cleared my empty plate and promptly placed the bill in front of me. When I inquired about the election, Betsy responded with a twinkle in her eye. She explained that they were doing everything they could to ensure he didn't win, as he had influential supporters with deep pockets backing him. The locals wanted nothing to do with him, but unfortunately, they didn't have enough votes or funds to stop him. I reached for my money clip, and a faint grin crossed my lips. Betsy noticed, and couldn't resist asking what was amusing, and if I knew something. With a grin, I replied, "Oh, maybe I have some information." Betsy's eyes sparkled with curiosity. I asked her eagerly if they really tied the knot, and she nodded affirmatively, adding that their wedding was even broadcast on television, kind of like a reality show. After a brief pause, I continued, mentioning that it seemed they missed the traditional honeymoon and that they were waiting for him to officially take office. She responded with a knowing smile. Leaving a $10 bill on the counter, I bid a friendly farewell, assuring her that I wasn't there to stir up trouble or meddle in matters that didn't concern me. The moment I stepped out, Betsy leaned in and asked if I had something to tell her, emphasizing the importance and her need for some sleep. I walked out the door with a persistent grin on my face, ready to face whatever lay ahead. As I settled into the car, eagerly anticipating some much-needed rest, I noticed Betsy peering at me through the window. Just as I was starting to doze off for a well-deserved nap, an insistent knocking on the door roused me from my slumber. Irritated, I initially tried to ignore the noise, hoping it would cease. I grumbled for the persistent knocker to go away, but the relentless knocking only grew louder. Reluctantly, I gave in to the persistent visitor and opened the door with some annoyance. In the darkness and the rain, a stern woman in a raincoat stood before me. Straining to make out her face, I grumbled that I hadn't broken any laws and told her to leave me be. Unperturbed, the woman firmly stated that Betsy had asked her to have a word with me. Despite the inclement weather, she insisted on taking a few minutes of my time. Disgruntled, I reluctantly agreed to hear her out, although fatigue weighed heavily on me, and I longed for that much-needed rest. I granted her a brief 10-minute window to speak, to which she pleaded with a resolute look in her eyes and voice. Annoyed by her insistence, I replied curtly, telling her I wasn't interested and to go find someone else to talk to. There was a tinge of disappointment in her voice as she responded, "Darn it, it's about Amelia. Meet me inside in 10 minutes. Surprised by the mention of Amelia's name, I hesitantly consented to her request. As she closed the door and hurried away, a faint half-smile graced her face. The restaurant still buzzed with activity, and a decent number of patrons filled the space. Intrigued and somewhat skeptical, I decided to oblige and headed inside, hoping to unravel the mystery surrounding Amelia's situation. Adjacent to the cafe's entrance, there was an area stocked with rain gear that would soon transition into winter wear in a couple of months. I spotted her sitting in a booth by the window with 2 cups of coffee before her. Her straight, glossy black hair, featuring a small white streak on one side, caught my attention. Observing her sun-kissed complexion, it became evident that she was an outdoors enthusiast, accustomed to the elements. Her well-tanned skin lacked the typical softness associated with more delicate individuals. In fact, she was far from a young woman. She appeared to be around 30, perhaps closer to 40. High cheekbones accentuated her facial features, devoid of any noticeable makeup. I took a seat in the booth across from her, extended my hand for a handshake, and introduced myself as Liam Connor. She shook my hand and replied with her name, Sally Wilmot. Out of politeness, I offered her something to eat and asked if she was hungry, but she declined, explaining that she had a signature dish just 3 hours ago and didn't plan to eat again for a while. She said this with a polite smile. Sally went on to share the reason behind her desire to speak with me. She mentioned that Betsy had indicated I might have some information about Robert and Amelia. Perplexed, I couldn't resist asking what the significance of Amelia was in all of this. Sally responded, "My brother Kevin is running against Robert," and after a brief pause she added, "So, yes, it's personal for me." Sally clarified, "But it's not just a personal matter. Kevin represents the interests of our neighborhood, and we believe that many people might not have a fair chance if Robert gets elected." Baffled, I inquired, "Okay, but I still don't see the link between his wife and all of this." Sympathetic, Sally nodded and explained that they weren't entirely sure either. All they knew was that something was amiss. Their election committee tried to gather information about Amelia, but came up empty-handed. Robert's campaign team remained tight-lipped and hadn't disclosed any details. It might be nothing, but they were growing increasingly anxious, and Betsy mentioned that I could shed some light on this matter. Amused by her astuteness, I chuckled softly and made a light-hearted comment about my poker skills. Sally acknowledged my statement with a knowing look. "Indeed," she said, validating my suspicions. "You clearly know something. So, will you tell me?" Finishing my coffee, I couldn't help but chuckle at the irony of her words. "I'm willing to answer any questions," I began. Sally, relieved, responded, "Oh, that's great. This has been driving us crazy. So, how do you know Amelia?" With a sigh of sincerity, I admitted, "She's my wife. We've been married for over 20 years, and we never got divorced. Although I haven't seen her in years, unless she divorced me without my knowledge, we're probably still legally married." "Yes, we're still married," I confirmed. Sally appeared shocked and momentarily speechless. She sat in silence, her gaze fixed on me. After a short pause, she finally found her voice and asked the burning question, "What was Amelia's maiden name when she got married?" "Her maiden name was Connor," I replied straightforwardly. Sally didn't even try to hide her astonishment. "My goodness," she exclaimed, her voice filled with surprise. This news seemed to stir a whirlwind of emotions in Sally. In the midst of it all, Betsy couldn't contain her joy and hurried over to our table, drawing the attention of everyone around. I was overwhelmed with both embarrassment and happiness when Sally rose from her seat. Touched by the moment, Sally planted a kiss on Betsy's lips, displaying her excitement. She then headed to a quieter corner of the restaurant and pulled out her cell phone to make a call. Still slightly blushing, Betsy leaned in and whispered that she hadn't seen Sally this excited in 5 years. She expressed her intention to get back to her car and return to work. I bid her farewell and expressed that it was a pleasure to meet her. As I walked toward the exit, the rain momentarily subsided, offering a brief break. However, before I could reach my car, Sally stopped me by grabbing my arm. She firmly insisted that I couldn't leave just yet and needed to talk to Kevin. Reluctantly, I agreed, realizing that a brief conversation wouldn't take up too much time. I conceded and stated that I'd be willing to spare a few minutes, though I honestly preferred to leave the past behind. Curiosity got the best of me, and I inquired about Kevin's arrival time since I had mentioned it to Betsy earlier. Sally assured me that he would meet us at my house. I then asked if she wanted to come with me, or preferred to take her own truck. In response, I stated that I'd follow her, as I felt more comfortable using my own transportation. Sally was driving an aging Jeep, but I chose to rely on my own car. As we drove several miles down a gravel road, it became evident that our destination was an old, weather-beaten house. The area around the well indicated that someone was inside. The absence of a conventional lawn was replaced by an abundance of gravel, although I tried my best to avoid getting dirty, which proved to be a challenge given the circumstances. Noticing the absence of other vehicles, I assumed that Kevin hadn't arrived yet. Upon entering the room, my attention was drawn to a designated area near the door for hanging wet coats and storing shoes. It seemed practical, especially given the presence of many coats and boots in the entrance area. The house's interior had a unique layout, resembling a classroom more than a traditional living room, with desks and computers in place of nightstands and table lamps. As I marveled at this distinctive setup, I met the eyes of Sally's 3 teenage sons, who were observing me. Breaking the silence, Sally introduced me, explaining my presence there to help Uncle Kevin. Sally then introduced her sons. Tracy, the eldest, followed by Tyler, and the youngest, Tanner. They all smiled politely and nodded in acknowledgement. I couldn't help but find the situation somewhat amusing and chuckled. I chuckled and remarked, "It's a bit odd that all their names start with the letter T. It can't help but amuse me, especially since I have two sons named Alvin and Louis." Tyler was the first to break the silence and speak, perhaps intrigued by our connection or eager to start a conversation. He inquired about the whereabouts of my sons, ignoring his mother's disapproving look. I casually replied, "Alvin is attending Texas A&M and Louis goes to Auburn." My response seemed to electrify the atmosphere and generate excitement in the room. Tracy, who had seemed rather reserved until then, suddenly became animated and exhibited an energy akin to that of the Energizer Bunny. Tracy enthusiastically exclaimed, "I'm actually heading to College Station this August." Their curiosity led to more questions, and I found myself genuinely engaged in their inquiries. Tracy inquired about how long Alvin had been studying at Texas A&M and what he was majoring in. Sally gently encouraged him to slow down, saying, "Take your time, dear. I'm sure Mr. Connors has plenty of time to answer your questions." Unbeknownst to them, Tracy had received a full football scholarship and had already committed to the ROTC program. Meanwhile, Tyler had been accepted to the prestigious U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis and would be embarking on his journey there in a year. As for Sally, she had experienced heartache when her husband, a courageous National Guard soldier, tragically lost his life in the Persian Gulf 5 years ago. Tanner chose not to share additional information, and I respected his decision by refraining from further questions. The youngest of the boys had yet to make his decision, but his mother ensured he remained focused on his studies. While I remained in the dark regarding the reason for Kevin's delay, the following hour was spent in conversation with Sally's sons on a variety of topics. Sally observed from the sidelines, noticing the bond forming between us. Unlike the one I shared with my own children, spending time with Sally's kids reminded me of how much I missed my own boys. Kevin eventually arrived, accompanied by 2 assistants. After they all met, Sally distributed tasks to her sons, and the grown-ups assembled at the kitchen table. There was a hint of doubt in the air regarding my claim to be Amelia's husband, but I had no desire to engage in an argument about it. When I rose from my seat and expressed my gratitude to Sally for the coffee and bid farewell to the boys, Sally strongly objected, urging me to sit back down. The remaining faces around the table fell into a hushed silence as Sally took charge of the conversation, exhibiting the demeanor of someone running for political office. Sally inquired about the evidence of my marriage to Amelia. With a swift motion, I produced a wedding photo from my wallet. Although time had passed, Amelia had aged and changed her hairstyle, but her unmistakable presence was still evident. I shifted my gaze to one of Kevin's assistants, who had a laptop in front of him. I instructed him to visit the Civil Registry Office of Berks County, Pennsylvania, where they could find online access to marriage certificates from 1960 to 1990. I told him to search under my name, Liam Connors, and specified the date, August 17, 1979. Kevin's assistant confirmed these instructions. Kevin visibly sighed with relief upon this revelation, and I nodded to affirm the validity of the information. I reassured them that they were welcome to investigate further, including searching for divorce records. As to the best of my knowledge and everyone else's, I was still married, and I wasn't concerned about the situation. I felt that the conversation was becoming monotonous and uninteresting. This time, no one objected as I stood to leave. I inquired if it would be all right to catch a few hours of sleep in their driveway before hitting the road, and Sally replied affirmatively. She escorted me to the door, and as I glanced back, I saw that Kevin and his associates were deeply engrossed in their political matters. The boys waved at me, or perhaps they didn't wave, as I exited the room. An hour later, the sounds of Kevin and his entourage departing reached my ears. I believed the night had passed quietly, but my peace was interrupted by another knock at the door. Sally hastily climbed into the cab, wearing a flannel nightgown, and gestured for me to be quiet, putting her finger to her lips. We were far enough from the house that the boys wouldn't overhear our conversation, but it seemed Sally just wanted us to remain silent. We spent at least an hour together, passionately professing our affection for one another. While it wasn't the most comfortable arrangement, The sleeping quarters in the truck cab were decent at best and suitable for resting. Given the circumstances, I made the most of it. Sally left as quietly as she had arrived, without exchanging a single word. As daylight broke, another knock came at the door. This time, Tanner invited me to join them for breakfast in the house. Thankfully, the boys and I shared similar food preferences, and Sally was adept at preparing such dishes. Conversing with the guys for an hour, I began to feel at ease and lighthearted. What's more, I felt comfortable enough to request permission from Sally to take a warm shower before departing. An hour passed, and I found myself back on the road, if only briefly. Just before reaching the highway, I was pulled over by the local sheriff. It turned out that Mr. Kevin wished to continue our conversation. I followed the police car to the place where Kevin awaited my arrival. He was in the midst of breakfast and kindly invited me to join. Betsy entered, brought coffee, and winked knowingly at me. It seemed she had a closer connection with Sally than I initially assumed. Apparently, Kevin's legal advisors were keen on my continued presence, employing the old adage, time is money. I tried to dissuade him, but he just grinned and carried on with the meal. It would have been easy to agree to everything and vanish without a trace, but considering the events of the previous night, I decided that staying a few more days was in my best interest. The party assured me they would cover the cost of a motel room and meals, though they lacked the funds for more. This presented a valuable opportunity to freshen up my wardrobe, settle unpaid bills, and attend to my banking needs using the convenience of Wi-Fi. I made the most of this chance by sending a couple of emails to my associates and promptly settling all outstanding bills. As I was folding the second load of laundry from the dryer, I was startled by Sally's unexpected appearance. She inquired about what I was doing with an innocent shrug. I replied that I was just folding laundry. Sally then reminded me that I was supposed to leave, emphasizing that I had said I was leaving that morning. Plans had changed, she explained, as my brother had asked her to extend her stay here for a few more days. She mentioned that she had come to see me the previous night, assuming I would be gone today, and acknowledged that my presence was undesirable for me. From Sally's hesitant words and choice of phrasing, it became evident that she had never intended for our interaction to extend beyond a single meeting, and she wasn't sure how to navigate the situation. I found her disappointment rather amusing, and it provided an opportunity for some levity. What's more, after my morning conversation with Kevin, I genuinely pondered the idea of purchasing a house and settling in this area permanently. Kevin painted a tempting picture of the situation, but I wasn't one to be easily swayed by empty promises. I decided to have an open conversation with Sally, inviting her to sit on a bench beside the dryers. I candidly explained to her that my brother insisted on extending her stay here for a few more days, just until they could decide on pursuing Robert. I promised to keep my distance from her and the boys until everything was resolved. I emphasized that it was never my intention to make her uncomfortable or embarrassed. Sally shook her head and revealed that the boys genuinely liked me. She said they had been asking when I could come back and were a bit disappointed to hear I was leaving. Tyler even asked her to discuss with me the possibility of staying a while longer. I apologized if my friendly intentions had caused any complications, and assured her that those boys reminded me of my own children, making it easy for me to connect with them. I emphasized that my intention was never to create trouble for her. In response, Sally said she must admit that she didn't make things any simpler when she came to my truck the previous night. She acknowledged that I had added a layer of complexity to the situation and asked me why I had come to her. In a hushed tone, she mentioned that it had been 5 years since her husband passed away, and explained that, after 5 long years devoid of comfort and passion, it had felt like the perfect moment for an opportunity like this to arise, especially since I was supposed to leave that day. Sally's enthusiasm was rekindled, and she questioned why I didn't leave. Disheartened, I swiftly gathered a stack of folded underwear, handed it to her, picked up the rest of my belongings, and then returned to my motel room. Engaging in lovemaking with a woman in a regular bed is certainly more convenient, but what pleased me most was sharing a shower together. By the end of the first week, all the boys received t-shirts and hoodies with the logos of Texas and Auburn. Sally kept one of the oversized Auburn t-shirts for herself. Meanwhile, I paid little attention to the political maneuvers. Kevin and his team seemed to be handling things fine without my involvement. But then, news of Amelia's enigmatic story emerged, and the media began presenting it as a sensation. Robert's supporters made futile attempts to downplay the significance of these revelations while they continued to deny or ignore the accusations. The situation only worsened, leading to a rapid decline in Robert's approval rating. I refrained from engaging in political affairs until one morning when I was visited at my motel. A tall, fair-haired woman with impeccable posture stood at the door. Even though I was only in my boxers, I invited her in while I was sorting out a stack of $500 bills. Her eyes evaded mine, but I carefully observed her every subtle movement. Dressed in a dark suit with a white shirt and modest black heels, she exuded the air of an experienced professional. She introduced herself as Mila and explained that she was an attorney from Levitt's Brothers in Sioux Falls. The fact that she knew my middle name sent a wave of unease through me. Sensing the urgency of the matter, I excused myself and went to the bathroom. Closing the bathroom door, I couldn't help but feel that the sound of the toilet tank filling with water reached my ears unmistakably. Despite my initial intention to restrain myself, mischief got the better of me, and I performed a subtle act of disruption. Less than a minute later, I left the bathroom and returned to Mila. Seated at the table, she inquired, "Was that necessary?" I responded with a hint of amusement. "Not really, but your tone made it seem like we'd be here for a while." "I apologize. I was just attempting to maintain professionalism." "You missed the mark, Mila." Her disappointment was palpable. "What do you need?" "Our company represents Robert. We have recently discovered that your marriage to Amelia Connors has not been legally dissolved, and we would like to rectify this situation." "How?" "Well, there are laws in the state that allow for accelerated dissolution of marriage under certain circumstances. We believe that with your assistance, we will be able to take advantage of these laws." Puzzled, I asked, "So you want me to divorce my wife?" Mila replied plainly, "Yes." I felt uneasy and wondered about her motivations. Why do I need this? My question appeared to catch her off guard, and she seemed surprised that I'd ask at this stage of the conversation. Although I had contemplated getting a divorce, I was cautious not to reveal this to Mrs. Mila. She sat contemplating my words before I made a request. I asked her to provide a straightforward and honest explanation of why my wife and I were no longer living together. She leaned back slightly, unbuttoned the top button of her blouse, and began to explain. She shared that my wife had an affair with a coworker 3 years ago, which led to her leaving because she couldn't resist me and my children any longer. Her candid explanation caught me off guard, and I told her that it was clear enough. I inquired about the purpose of our meeting, and she sighed, acknowledging the challenging legal situation my wife, Amelia, and Mr. Robert were in. She hoped to ease Amelia's situation and expedite the divorce. I raised an eyebrow and asked about the benefits for me. Mrs. Mila replied that it would grant me freedom. I chuckled softly, expressing contentment with my current situation and suggesting she needed to persuade me that my life would improve. She paused, trying to understand my perspective, and asked what I wanted, whether I sought financial compensation, and how much. I leaned in and inquired about the terms of the proposed divorce. Her response was unexpected. None. She clarified that the process could be expedited without an exchange of money, property division, or custody disputes. Both parties would simply leave with what they had at the moment without owing anything to each other, resulting in a clean and final resolution. Intrigued, I asked about the typical duration of such a process. She informed me that it usually took less than 90 days, and that a decision would be reached before the elections. We exchanged a knowing look, acknowledging its significance. I asked if I should visit my wife for reassurance, but Mrs. Mila responded that they would prefer if I didn't. Finally, I agreed to the proposal but added one condition. They must cover my accommodation and food expenses until the process was completed. Mrs. Mila smiled, showing that the outcome exceeded her initial expectations. The prospect of gaining freedom without a financial burden was highly appealing to me. She assured me that she could prepare the necessary documents and provide them for my signature that afternoon. She believed everything should go smoothly and mentioned consulting with her attorney, foreseeing no issues. Although I didn't have legal representation, I wanted to discuss this with Kevin first. I requested her contact information explaining that I would reach out if my lawyer encountered any problems. I made it clear that if she didn't receive a call, she should bring the documents directly to me. With that task taken care of, I felt a sense of relief. I walked her to the door as she departed. I noticed Sally on the other side of the parking lot, but she quickly drove away before I could signal her. I quickly shaved, dressed, and headed to Belly Up. Betsy poured me coffee but gave me a disapproving look. I asked if they would at least let me explain everything, and she replied that it wasn't her concern, but I'd better come up with a convincing story. Breakfast with Sally was hot, but the conversation was cool. I ate as quickly as I could and immediately called Kevin. He was out of town, but we managed to talk for 20 minutes. To my surprise, he was pleased with the whole situation and advised me to accept it. He emphasized the importance of obtaining copies of all documents and exuded confidence. I asked him to contact Sally on my behalf, and he ended the conversation with chuckles. There was a large car wash station not far from Highway 90. I spent over an hour giving the car a thorough cleaning and vacuuming, and I carefully waxed it. It would have been easier to pay for professional service, but I was in dire need of therapy. Before returning, I decided to have lunch at Cracker Barrel. This way, I hoped to avoid Betsy's wrath, as she had strategically parked right outside my room door this time. When I pulled up, Sally emerged from the Jeep looking somewhat bewildered. Her expression clearly indicated that Kevin had spoken to her over the past 2 hours. She genuinely apologized to me, acknowledging the gravity of her mistake. Sometimes guilt can lead to positive outcomes. By the time Miss Miller returned with the papers I needed to sign, Sally had already departed. To my surprise, she insisted on giving me a $10,000 check. While Robert's campaign continued to decline, my divorce application moved smoothly through the legal process. Tracy was now living in College Station, looked after by a friend. The timing was perfect, and my divorce became official. Just before the election, Kevin emerged as the winner and expressed his gratitude, promising to personally reimburse me for the assistance. It seemed like I hadn't done much, but I jokingly told him that I'd consider it even if he introduced me to his sister. In response, Sally playfully nudged me on the arm. After the election, things took a turn for the worse for Amelia. She found herself facing unexpected bigamy charges, and mysteriously, she disappeared once more, which seemed to be her specialty. Sadly, I never had the opportunity to see or speak to her again. I decided to sell the truck and use the money to purchase a house in a small gravel pit near Huron. Sally and I got married at Christmas, and all 5 of my boys were present for the wedding. Betsy moved into a 2-story trailer house and assured us that she'd take good care of it. We found out from the ultrasound that we were expecting a girl, so I asked for suggestions for girl names, starting with the letter T.
In 2006, I attended the brokerage and investments firm Christmas party as the +1 for my wife, Michelle, or Mickey, who was one of their top salespeople. During the party, Mickey's colleagues, Bob Ford and her boss, Mark Henry, discussed the profitability of MBS products. Mark urged Mickey to invest in MBS, but she refused, stating she wouldn't recommend anything to clients she wouldn't invest in herself. Leon Goldberg, the top sales performer, was confident the MBS market would continue to deliver high returns. I only half listened to the conversation, but wondered why Mickey wasn't investing in something that seemed so profitable. Not wanting to embarrass her in front of her colleagues, I decided to wait until we got home to ask her. Mickey is extremely knowledgeable about financial planning and investment strategies, far more so than I am. I leave all our financial decisions to her. After the Christmas party, I asked her about mortgage-backed securities, MBS, and why we weren't investing in them if they were so profitable. Mickey explained that an MBS is a mortgage-backed security, but she had concerns about them, seeing danger signs in the market. She believed these MBSs could potentially causing the entire U.S. economy to collapse. While her colleagues were focused on short-term profits, Mickey warned that the housing market could crash when the bubble burst. Given that I was a project manager for a home builder in Jacksonville, I asked how this might affect my job. Mickey advised me to start looking for a job in a different industry, as she planned to do the same, anticipating that Thompson & Associates would be in big trouble when the bubble burst. Trusting Mickey's judgment, I decided not to wait and sent my resume to a headhunter. For 9 months, I received no job offers, with my agent, Bill Ferguson, mentioning that the job market was already showing signs of an economic decline. In October 2007, Ferguson called about a job opportunity. He mentioned a possible position in Asheville, North Carolina. I responded that I would need to discuss it with my wife and asked what the job entailed. Ferguson explained that the job was with Standard Auto Services Corporation, a company that builds and franchises automobile service centers. They needed project managers to oversee construction, and while the starting salary was about $2,000 less than what I was currently making, there was room for growth. I inquired about the amount of travel involved. Ferguson noted that the company was building centers in North Carolina, Tennessee, and Virginia, so significant travel would be required. Concerned about the economic outlook, I asked how solid the company was and if they could survive a recession. Ferguson relayed that the company representative believed the service centers would be essential during a recession because people would need affordable places to service their cars if they couldn't buy new ones. I told Ferguson that I would discuss the offer with Mickey and get back to him the next morning. When I got home, Mickey was in the kitchen making fried chicken, her signature dish, and my favorite meal. After cleaning the kitchen, I told Mickey about the job offer from Standard Auto Services Corporation, expecting she might hesitate about moving to Asheville, North Carolina. Instead, Mickey said Asheville was supposed to be a beautiful area and asked when I would need to start. When I mentioned the start date was the 1st of the month, she noted that it only gave us 3 weeks. Mickey would need time to give notice at T&A and inform her clients that she was leaving, which she thought might take longer than 3 weeks. I asked if she was okay with moving to Asheville, and she reiterated that the coming economic troubles would destroy T&A and likely leave me out of work. The job offer sounded good, but she wanted to research the company first. After 2 hours on her computer, Mickey concluded that SASC looked solid with a good business plan and advised me to accept the offer. In October 2007, I moved to Asheville during the last week of the month and found a 2-bedroom apartment, while Mickey stayed in Jacksonville to sell our house and notify her clients that she was leaving T&A. She informed her clients they could either stay with another T&A broker or transfer to a different brokerage. Mickey also sent her resume to brokers near Asheville and secured a job with a broker who had just opened an office there. It took a month to sell our house, and though we had to lower the asking price by $5,000, we still made a profit on the sale. When Mickey finally arrived in Asheville, I was working on 2 SASC service centers in Western North Carolina, allowing me to be home every night. We spent the next 4 months exploring the area together. In spring 2008, we bought a foreclosed house on Chandler Road, 11 miles north of Asheville, overlooking the French Broad River. It was the only house built in a planned subdivision before the builders went bankrupt. A large colonial with 4 bedrooms, 3.5 bathrooms, and a 2-car garage. We loved the house and thought it was perfect for raising a family, although it took time to adjust to the quiet with no nearby neighbors. Mickey quickly adapted to her new job, growing her client list, and even reconnecting with some of her previous clients. In January, the 2 projects I was managing were completed, and I picked up 2 more in Tennessee, which meant spending 3 or 4 nights a week away from home. It was tough, but our plan was to stick with this job until the housing market improved, allowing me to return to the home building industry. The one upside of being away so much was the quality time when I came home. After 4 years with SASC, I was doing well as the company expanded, which meant more time away from home. Mickey never complained, focusing on building our wealth as an investment advisor with plans for us to start a family and retire early. In March 2012, after being away for 3 weeks, I returned home for a 4-day weekend and was met by a serious Mickey. She told me she had been thinking about starting our family, but felt our financial situation wasn't yet ideal. She had come across a new investment opportunity that could potentially get us where we needed to be within 2 years, allowing us to start a family and for her to become a stay-at-home mom. Mickey explained that she had met an investment advisor, Dave Huffman, at a seminar and had been discussing this idea with him for a few weeks. She mentioned that Dave, who had experience in such investments, was enthusiastic about the idea and believed it could more than triple our investment. She assured me that the risk was reasonable and that they would explain the details and the required investment amount once Dave arrived. Later, I heard a car pull up the driveway and went outside to meet Huffman, who arrived in a red 2010 Corvette. I couldn't help feeling a bit jealous, as I had always liked Corvettes, but had to drive a Ford F-154 wheel drive for my job. As we shook hands, I assessed Huffman, and he likely did the same with me. He was about my height, 6'2", with shorter, darker brown hair and a mustache. He had a friendly smile and spoke with a slight accent I couldn't quite place. When I asked where he was from, he mentioned he grew up in Pennsylvania and had spent 10 years in Cincinnati. We entered the house, and Mickey appeared from the kitchen carrying a tray with 2 beers, a glass of white wine, and some snacks. She remarked that since we had already met, we could get started. Mickey then began explaining the plan, noting that she hadn't shared the details with me yet. Mickey recounted how, a month ago, she was working with a client who owned a drilling company involved in fracking for natural gas in Oklahoma. He mentioned that one of his competitors was interested in starting fracking in North Carolina, where the legislature had recently approved it, with drilling expected to begin the following year. This conversation sparked an idea in Mickey. She explained that legally, to explore, extract, or sell mineral deposits, including natural gas, one must either own the mineral rights for the property or have a lease agreement with the rights owner. Mickey did some research and realized that if we could acquire the mineral rights from property owners before the drilling company did, they would have to lease those rights from us to extract the gas. This could be a highly profitable venture for us. After Mickey finished, Huffman quickly added that when Mickey shared her idea, he conducted his own research and confirmed she was correct. They could purchase the rights to the gas beneath the land without needing to buy the property, and he believed they could easily triple their investment if they acted quickly. Although I trusted Mickey's judgment, I was skeptical of Huffman and uncertain about the risks involved. Huffman explained that most landowners didn't own the mineral rights under their land, as those rights had been sold decades ago. He discovered through public records that a single family owned the majority of these rights in the area they were considering. Huffman had already contacted Daniel Owen, the head of the family, who expressed interest in selling the rights for the right price. The Owen family had retained the mineral rights when they sold the land, anticipating oil might be discovered, though it never was. It became clear that Mickey and Huffman were committed to the plan, with or without my agreement. Trusting Mickey, I agreed to go along with her suggestion. When I asked about the cost, they told me we would invest $500,000, matched by Dave, to purchase the mineral rights from the Owen family. Concerned about the substantial sum, I questioned their certainty. But Mickey insisted it was an opportunity too good to pass up, with Huffman agreeing. Mickey then mentioned the need to sign a partnership agreement and grant her power of attorney to act on my behalf when I was out of town. She handed me a stack of papers, and I signed 7 different documents. As soon as Huffman left, Mickey, unusually eager, pulled me to bed. Despite her initial hesitation about being in front of the window, the thrill seemed to excite her. Mickey made love to me twice more that weekend, but by Monday morning, as I headed back to Tennessee, I felt uneasy about her involvement with Huffman in the business deal. My distrust of Huffman and the large financial commitment contributed to my discomfort. Adding to my concern during our passionate weekend, Mickey never said, "I love you," something she always did before. This made me question whether their act was out of love or just to fulfill her needs. 3 weeks later, when I returned home, Mickey greeted me with a distant kiss on the cheek and little interest in my life. When I asked about the business plan, she gave a brief, unenthusiastic response. She seemed standoffish all weekend, and when I asked her about it, she claimed she was just tired and hinted that my frequent absences weren't helping. For the first time since our marriage, I was relieved to leave for Tennessee on Monday. Mickey's coldness persisted during our phone calls, though she eventually warmed up slightly. However, she continued to deny anything was wrong, which made me worry about our marriage. I tried calling at different times, and while Mickey always answered, her attitude didn't ease my concerns. She seemed annoyed by my calls, though she never said so directly. Believing that my absence was the issue, I put more effort into making her happy when I was home, but her attitude remained unchanged as the months passed. In January 2013, as I prepared to head home for a long weekend, I called Mickey to let her know my travel plans. This time, she sounded unusually happy and warned me about icy roads due to recent snowfall. Her tone was more loving than it had been in months, making me hopeful that whatever had been bothering her was over. When I arrived home, I noticed tire tracks in the snow leading to my side of the garage, too wide to be from Mickey's Honda. The tracks suggested a car had been in the garage before the snowfall and made me think of Huffman's Corvette. Mickey greeted me warmly in the kitchen, but I was suspicious and asked if she had been out in the snow. She said she hadn't, but I didn't mention the tracks. By February, I was convinced Mickey was having an affair, likely with Huffman. To confirm my suspicions, I made an unannounced trip home a week early. I rented a car, parked it a quarter mile away, and entered the house quietly. After checking the garage and finding nothing unusual, I hid in the basement to wait for Mickey. determined to confront her if she returned with Huffman. I could hear Huffman's Corvette long before it even reached the driveway, so I moved to the kitchen door to eavesdrop on their conversation as they came inside. I was waiting for the right moment to interrupt, but when I heard what they were talking about, I was completely taken aback. "I don't understand why you're so hard on yourself. This isn't your fault. He made his choice, and he didn't care how much it would hurt you," Huffman said. "I know, but isn't there another way to handle this?" Mickey asked. "Well, you could file for divorce and claim adultery, but that would take at least 6 months. That means we couldn't be together until the divorce is finalized. If he finds out we're together, he could countersue and you'd lose your advantage. After all that, you'd only get half of everything, and we need all of it for our plans. My way will get you everything you want. And after he pulled you away from your friends and your job, don't you think you deserve everything?" Huffman explained. I didn't force Mickey to move anywhere. We both agreed that moving to Asheville was the right decision for us. It was hard for me to process what I was hearing. Mickey thinks I cheated on her. Where did she get that idea? And she wants a divorce to be with Huffman. My stomach was knotting up. I wasn't worried about the divorce. That was inevitable once I learned she was cheating. But if she thought I was unfaithful, why didn't she confront me? Clearly, she didn't care enough to find out the truth. "But won't I be the prime suspect?" Mickey said. "What are they even suspecting her of? What the hell are they planning?" My mind was racing with these questions, spinning like a top. I had to force myself to focus on their conversation, which was hard given my state of shock. Who will even notice he's missing? Once I become Tom Mayfield, nobody will be looking for him, and his body will never be found. After that, we'll sell this house and move to California. I can make myself look enough like Tom to get a California driver's license. Then we'll be in the clear, Huffman said. I thought, oh my God, they're planning to end me, and Huffman wants to take over my life. Why the hell would he want to be me? What's in it for him? "So when are we going to do it?" Mickey asked. "We'll do it after he files your taxes. We don't want any trouble with the IRS, and by then, he should have his annual bonus. I'll handle everything. All you need to do is keep him satisfied and clueless until we're ready," Huffman replied. I was in shock. I thought Mickey loved me, but here she was, on the other side of the door, conspiring to have me killed with that bastard Huffman. I was still on the basement stairs when I heard Mickey set the alarm, trapping me inside since disarming it would reveal my presence. I retreated to the basement, sitting in an old chair trying to process what I overheard. I'd never cheated on Mickey. How could she think I did? Was she really plotting with Huffman to end me? I realized I had no proof to take to the police, and while stopping them was crucial, I wanted to ensure they were punished for plotting against me. Anger surged through me as I considered my options. Knowing I had to stay hidden until morning, I forced myself to sleep in the chair. In the morning, after hearing both cars leave, I went upstairs, found their breakfast remnants, and cooked myself some eggs and toast. As I ate, I began planning. I was confident I could thwart Mickey and Huffman's scheme, but I also wanted to ensure they couldn't profit if something went wrong. I realized I had until April to act. Although I briefly wondered if convincing Mickey I hadn't cheated might change her mind, I concluded it didn't matter. Plotting to end me while sleeping with Huffman was unforgivable. They both needed to pay. In the next 2 weeks, I canceled my life insurance, changed my will to leave everything to the Salvation Army, and closely monitored our bank and investment accounts. By the end of March, I had done everything I could to prepare, but I still lacked the evidence needed to put them away. I knew my next step was getting inside Huffman's house. On the first Thursday in April, I returned from Memphis unannounced. At 5 p.m., I parked my truck near an abandoned Esso station on Old Marshall Highway, a short distance from our house, though it was a 15-minute drive. From there, I could see the house and waited to spot Mickey. Her Honda passed by at 5:16 p.m., and I watched for Huffman's red Corvette. But instead, a brand-new cobalt blue Corvette passed 5 minutes later. I suspected Huffman might have bought a new car, and my suspicion grew when I saw the blue Corvette pull into my garage through binoculars. After waiting half an hour to ensure they didn't leave, I drove to Huffman's house, located in a secluded, wooded area. I parked nearby and approached the house, which didn't appear to have an alarm system. Searching outside, I found a hidden key above the back door. Inside, I started my search in Huffman's study. On his desk, I found a laptop, powered on, and accessed it using a list of passwords hidden under the computer. Scanning through his emails, I found nothing incriminating, no correspondence with Mickey, and nothing of business interest, until I discovered an email from a real estate agent in Deadwood, South Dakota, dated February 3rd. Dear Mr. Mayfield, as your agent, I'm pleased to inform you that Mr. McRannell has accepted your $1.5 million offer for the Deadwood Saloon, Hotel, and Casino on Main Street in Deadwood. I'll send the signed contract via FedEx as soon as I have it. We can schedule the closing with Mr. McRannell's lawyers once they receive the due diligence check from you. Mr. McRannell hopes to close the deal in early May. I look forward to meeting you at the closing. Sincerely, Matthew Johnson. I was stunned. Huffman was buying a hotel and casino in Deadwood, South Dakota, using my name. Was he using the money we gave him for mineral rights to fund this? Was this part of his plan to steal my identity? I printed the letter and continued searching. Though most emails were unremarkable, I found a link to his bank account. There was no record of our $500,000 deposit, but there was a check written to Mayfield Enterprises, LLC. Had Mickey and Huffman created a company in my name? I Googled LLC and learned it stands for Limited Liability Company, which can protect personal assets from lawsuits. I wondered if they created Mayfield Enterprises, LLC, to buy mineral rights or for something else. Was the Deadwood purchase linked to this LLC? The more I uncovered, the more questions arose. In Huffman's bookmarks, I found a link labeled ME, which led to the website for Mayfield Enterprises. The homepage featured a photo of Huffman and Mickey, identified as Thomas and Michelle Mayfield, president and treasurer of Mayfield Enterprises, LLC. Huffman was already taking over my identity. The website described Mayfield Enterprises as an investment company focused on mergers and acquisitions. It seemed incomplete, and an internet search yielded no results, suggesting the site hadn't been made public yet. I found nothing else useful on Huffman's computer, so I searched the desk. In the top drawer, I discovered a loaded 9mm and left it there. In the next drawer, I found an open FedEx envelope containing the purchase contract for the Deadwood Saloon, Casino, and Hotel. The contract, offering $1.5 million, was signed by Thomas Mayfield, but it wasn't my signature. It seemed Huffman had forged it. I also found 2 notebooks, one blue and one green. The green notebook detailed Huffman's plan over the past couple of years, laid out like an outline for a book. The plan, which included my murder, involved Huffman, Mickey, and me. Huffman had specifically searched for a married couple, around his age, with good careers, no kids, and new to the area. He wanted a wife who was attractive, assertive, and trusted by her husband, who needed to work long hours or travel often. He found Mickey on LinkedIn, researched us thoroughly, and decided we were the perfect targets. He described Mickey as smart and hot, confident he could seduce her, while seeing me as a drone he could easily manipulate. His plan began in 2011 when he posed as an investment analyst to meet Mickey at a broker's seminar. He discovered that Mickey appreciated compliments on her intelligence and style, not just her looks. After 3 months, he persuaded her to have lunch with him, and they began meeting for meals regularly, at least twice a week. Huffman's next move was to send Mickey an anonymous note claiming I was having an affair in Tennessee. This sparked Mickey's suspicions, and Huffman easily fueled her anger. He convinced her to wait for proof before taking action. That proof came in the form of another anonymous note with photos showing me with a blonde woman, supposedly having dinner and leaving my hotel room. The photos were clearly doctored, as I had never met that woman. Once Mickey was angry enough to consider divorce, Huffman seduced her. Their affair began over a year ago. Huffman told Mickey he loved her and wanted to marry her after the divorce, but advised her to keep quiet about my supposed cheating. He convinced her to start hiding money to prevent me from getting any in the divorce. Huffman played on Mickey's resentment, reminding her how unfair I had been by moving her to North Carolina, away from her friends and family, and then allegedly cheating on her. He got her so angry that she wanted to leave me penniless. Huffman pointed out that in North Carolina's no-fault divorce, I would still get half of everything. When Mickey finally expressed that it wasn't fair for me to get anything, Huffman suggested a way for her to get everything: planning my murder. Over a couple of months, she began to agree and started plotting with him. The idea of buying mineral rights was a scam from the start, designed to drain our savings and put the money out of my reach. Mickey assured Huffman that I was clueless about finances and trusted her completely. She convinced me that buying mineral rights was a great investment, leading me to sign the documents to start the LLC and hand over all our savings, like a trusting fool I did. On page 46 of the notebook, Huffman detailed a grave he'd dug 20 miles north with GPS coordinates. He planned to end me with cyanide in my coffee, then bury me and assume my identity as Tom Mayfield. They'd resign from my job, sell my house, and leave town. Mickey helped form Mayfield Enterprises, LLC, but might not have known about Huffman's Deadwood Saloon purchase. The last page of the notebook had the GPS location of Mickey's grave in Colorado, which she might not appreciate. I couldn't go to the police with the notebook since I stole it. Huffman could claim it was just a book outline. Instead, I decided to confront them, let Mickey read the notebook, record the meeting, and then contact the police. I waited until Friday, hoping Huffman would stay with Mickey so I could retrieve the green notebook. After returning everything to its place and staying at a nearby motel, I used the GPS coordinates to find my grave, driving 15 miles north and following a farm path for about 500 yards. Halfway down a wooded hillside ending in a swampy area, I found a grave site, a dirt pile on plywood covered with a trap, and a hole about 6 feet long and 4 feet deep. Was this to be my final resting place? At 5:15 p.m., I parked by the SSO station and saw Mickey drive by. I waited until nearly 6 p.m. to see if Huffman would drive by, then checked his house. The blue Corvette was in the driveway. At 6:30 p.m., Huffman left and I followed him to the SSO station, then saw him return to my driveway and enter the garage. After Huffman's garage door closed, I went to his house, checked his email, and grabbed the notebook and the Deadwood Saloon Hotel and Casino purchase contract. I also took the Colt from his drawer for protection. I returned to my house around 8 p.m., parked outside, and entered through the garage. The Colt was hidden in my belt. In the kitchen, I heard music and voices from the living room. When I peeked in, I saw Mickey and Huffman without clothes on the sofa. Mickey had seeds leaking from her, and they were drinking wine. With the music on, they didn't hear me. I was so furious, I almost skipped the confrontation and shot them both. I stepped back into the kitchen and set my phone to record audio. Taking a deep breath, I exhaled slowly before walking into the room. "I guess you weren't expecting me this weekend," I said loudly enough to be heard over the music. Huffman spun around so quickly that he fell off the sofa, and Mickey screamed, dropping her wine glass. The situation was almost funny, Huffman on the floor looking up at me, while Mickey scrambled to cover herself, with spilled wine mixing with her bodily fluids on the leather sofa. "Why don't you two get dressed, and then we can have a talk," I suggested. After the initial shock, Mickey seemed unfazed as she went upstairs to our bedroom. Huffman picked up his clothes and began dressing right there. Once Huffman was dressed, I said, "Let's sit down and wait for Mickey to return." "Let's not make a big deal out of this," Huffman suggested. "Are you kidding? You're sleeping with my wife, and I'm supposed to just brush it off? This is a huge deal to me," I said. Huffman raised his hands in a gesture of understanding. We waited in silence until Mickey came downstairs in a bathrobe. She glanced at me, then at Huffman. I noticed a faint smirk on Huffman's face as he said, "I could use a cup of coffee. How about you? Mickey, why don't you make a pot?" Mickey appeared calm when she walked into the room, but her expression changed to worry when Huffman asked her to make coffee. I realized from her reaction that Huffman must have signaled her to poison my drink. It seemed like Huffman was ready to take me out. From where I was sitting, I could see Mickey in the kitchen, preparing the coffee and filling the machine with water. After she was out of view, I figured she was getting ready to make what she thought would be my final cup of coffee. As she didn't return to the living room, the silence grew increasingly uncomfortable. "So, how long have you two been having an affair?" I asked. Huffman grinned and replied, "We've been in love for just over a year now." We sat in silence for about 10 minutes until the coffee maker made its usual hissing sound, signaling that the coffee was done. After another 5 minutes, Huffman called out, "Hey, if you're free, bring in the coffee." "In a minute," Mickey answered. A few minutes later, Mickey appeared with the cups, placing them on a tray before setting the tray on the coffee table. She handed me my cup first and then gave Huffman his. When she finally sat down, she looked at me with a sorrowful expression. I hoped that meant she felt guilty about what she was doing. Huffman took a sip of his coffee and smiled at Mickey. I picked up my cup, held it for a moment, and then set it back down. "It's too hot," I said, placing the cup back on the table. "So, Mickey, why? Why did you let yourself be drawn to this piece of trash?" Huffman smirked again as he sipped his coffee and said to Mickey, "You might as well tell him. It doesn't matter now. You were never around and Dave was," Mickey said. "He convinced me I'd be better off with him than with you." Her answer seemed odd to me. She didn't accuse me of infidelity, which I expected would be her go-to excuse. Huffman also seemed unsettled by her response, looking displeased. I picked up my cup once more and said, "That's a pretty weak excuse for having an affair." Huffman glanced at Mickey and said, "It's more complicated than you think. This isn't just an affair. Mickey will be my wife once the divorce is finalized. I pretended to take a sip from my cup while watching Mickey's reaction. She was focused on Huffman, who was eyeing me, clearly waiting for me to drink from the poisoned cup. When I set the cup back down, Huffman's frustration was evident. I decided it was time to end the pretense. "Mickey, could you please fetch the notebook I left on the kitchen table?" I asked. As Mickey stood up, I discreetly drew the Colt from under my jacket, keeping it hidden behind my right thigh. "What notebook?" Huffman asked, looking puzzled. "While you were busy with my wife last night, I visited your place. I found a rather interesting notebook in your desk," I said. "The green one with your plans for Mickey and me." When Mickey returned with the notebook, Huffman snatched it from her and said, "It's just some silly notes I made for fun." "Did you let Mickey read it?" "I think she should," I replied. Mickey remained silent, just sitting there and staring at Huffman. "Mickey doesn't need to see that," Huffman said, trying to downplay the situation. "Well, the police will be very interested in it when they arrive, especially once they discover the cyanide in the coffee Mickey made for me. You two are going to be in serious trouble," I warned. Huffman stood up and moved toward me, but stopped when he saw the Colt in my hand. "Sit back down," I ordered. Huffman picked up his coffee cup, looking as if he might throw it at me. I stood up and aimed it at his head, saying, "Sit down and be quiet." Huffman complied and sat back down, as did I. Mickey and Huffman both seemed to be waiting for me to speak. Huffman tried to maintain his composure as he sipped his coffee, but Mickey looked extremely anxious. Finally, Mickey spoke up. "Tom, I'm really sorry for everything that's happened. You don't have to worry. I didn't put anything in your coffee." Huffman shot Mickey an angry look and demanded, "What did you do?" "I found the notebook in the kitchen while making the coffee and read it. Everything you told me was a lie. I was ready to end, Tom, because I believed your deceit, and now I discover that you plan to end me. I was so foolish, but I'm not anymore. I put the poison in your coffee, you jerk." Huffman shouted, "Damn you!" and lunged at Mickey. She moved away, causing him to crash to the floor. As he tried to get up, his breathing became labored and his lips started turning blue. He collapsed again, convulsing and foaming at the mouth. Within minutes, he was dead. Mickey sat on the sofa, tears streaming down her face as she looked at Huffman's lifeless body. With tears still flowing, Mickey looked at me and said, "I'm sorry, Tom. You should call the police now. When they arrive, I'll confess that I put the poison in his coffee." I held the phone, ready to dial, but as I considered what to tell the police, I realized this situation might have serious consequences for me as well. Looking at Huffman's body on the floor made me feel nauseous, so I walked to the kitchen and sat at the table. Mickey followed and took a seat across from me. She buried her face in her hands and said, "I can't believe I ruined my life like this. I let that bastard destroy everything. I'm so sorry. I deserve whatever happens to me now." When I didn't reply, Mickey asked, "Aren't you going to call? Could you get me a beer while I figure this out?" I replied. "Huffman isn't going anywhere, so why should we rush?" I sat quietly for 10 or 15 minutes before taking a sip of the beer and finishing it before speaking again. "How would you like to avoid jail time?" I asked. Mickey responded, "How could I? I killed him and you saw me do it. Plus, you have that notebook with his plan to off you with my help. I also recorded our conversation. How many people know about you and Huffman? Nobody knows except for you. We made sure no one saw us together in public, and I never mentioned the affair to anyone," Mickey replied. "Why did you ask if I wanted to avoid going to jail? If you want to stay out of prison, we need to deal with the problem in the other room," I said, pointing toward the next room. "Deal with him? How do we do that?" Mickey asked. "Since he kindly left us an empty grave, we'll follow his plan, but with a change. The grave will be for him instead of me." Mickey's face went ashen as she looked at me. "You want to bury him?" "No, we will bury him. I need you to empty his pockets. Give me his car keys, wallet, and anything else he's carrying." "Can't you do that? He was your lover and you killed him, so it's your job." Mickey went into the living room, took Huffman's wallet from his back pocket, and then rolled him onto his back to search his front pockets. After she was done, she handed me Huffman's wallet and keys. "While you get dressed, I'm going to drive my truck into the garage," I said. I had to back Huffman's Corvette out of the garage before parking my truck. While in the vet, I briefly fantasized about owning it, but quickly dismissed it as a problem to address later. Once the vet was outside, I parked my truck as close to the kitchen door as possible. Inside, Mickey, dressed in jeans and a sweatshirt, was waiting in the kitchen. We dragged the body to the garage, loaded it into my truck bed, and covered it with a tarp. I instructed Mickey to get in the truck while I checked for a shovel and hand truck in the back. The first 10 minutes of the drive were silent until I asked Mickey why she had betrayed me. She explained that Dave had convinced her I was cheating and claimed he was in love with her. He persuaded her that leaving me was necessary for their future together. When I asked why she chose to end me instead of just divorcing me, Mickey revealed it was for the money. Dave promised that removing me would allow them to build Mayfield Enterprises and make millions. She admitted she was manipulated by her anger and guilt, and knew forgiveness would be difficult, if not impossible, for both of us. I didn't respond to Mickey's explanation. Instead, I asked why Huffman was planning to take over my identity. Mickey said Huffman intended to ensure no one would come looking for me by making it seem like we had quit our jobs, sold the house, and moved to California. When I inquired about the new Corvette, Mickey revealed that Huffman had bought it a few days ago. I expressed concern that the car might be a problem, and suggested selling it to avoid attracting attention. Mickey then laughed and said the car wasn't a problem at all. It was actually leased by Mayfield Enterprises for the president. Since the car was registered to Thomas Mayfield, and I was Thomas Mayfield, the issue was resolved. Excited at the thought of owning the car, I quickly refocused on our situation and asked about Mayfield Enterprises. Mickey explained that the company was set up to buy troubled firms, break them up, and sell off their assets, starting with small companies and expanding as profits grew. I compared the plan to a smash-and-grab operation where a gang raids a store for valuables. Mickey didn't like the comparison but accepted the description. I then asked her what she knew about the Deadwood Saloon Hotel and Casino. She was unfamiliar with it. I handed her the purchase contract and the email from the real estate agent. After reading them under the overhead light, Mickey concluded that Mayfield Enterprises would need to proceed with the purchase unless we could find a way to cancel the contract. Mickey confirmed that Huffman had never discussed the plan with her. We drove in silence to the gravesite. With only a sliver of moonlight, I used a battery-powered work light to illuminate the area. I removed the plywood covering the hole and leaned it against the truck. We slid Huffman's body onto my hand truck and rolled it to the hole. Tilting the hand truck, I let Huffman's body fall into the grave, landing face up with a smirk that I noted with a muttered remark. Disturbed by the sight, I moved on to cover the body. I shoveled dirt from the plywood into the hole and, with Mickey's help, filled the rest of the grave. We then loaded the tarp, plywood, and hand truck back into my truck and covered the grave with dead branches. The entire process took less than 20 minutes. We returned home in silence. I parked my truck outside and put the Corvette in the garage. Mickey went inside and handed me a beer when I entered the kitchen. I told her that life would continue as usual, with me heading back to Memphis on Sunday and her returning to work on Monday. I made it clear that our relationship was over and instructed her to find a lawyer and file for divorce while I was in Memphis. I added that she needed to handle the dismantling of Mayfield Enterprises and that we would discuss things further the next day. I would be staying in the guest room. The next morning, Mickey had already made coffee. She reassured me that she hadn't added anything to it and joined me at the table. Mickey said we couldn't dismantle Mayfield Enterprises yet because of a clause in the purchase contract for the Deadwood Saloon Hotel and Casino. We needed to pay a $150,000 advance for due diligence before April 10th, which we wouldn't get back if we backed out. If we refused to pay, we'd face a lawsuit and end up paying the $150K plus court costs. Mickey suggested we should at least investigate the casino and keep the Corvette, which is leased by Mayfield Enterprises. After breakfast, I planned to move the plywood and tarp from the gravesite to Huffman's garage to avoid any connection to our house. Mickey would search Huffman's house for anything linking us to him. At Huffman's house, Mickey checked the bedroom and clothes while I packed up the study. I shut down the computer, gathered papers, and found several keys, putting everything into a box. I almost tossed the blue notebook into the box without checking it, but then realized I hadn't read it. The blue notebook detailed a plan from 2 years prior involving a young woman named Claire. Huffman had conned her into investing in North Carolina land. Instead of leaving town as planned, he stole a car, forced Claire's car off a cliff, and fled with her money. I handed Mickey the blue notebook and suggested she read it, hoping it would make her feel better about her actions. After reading it, Mickey cried, lamenting her failure to recognize Huffman's true nature. Once she calmed down, I asked if she found anything during her search. Mickey found only a few restaurant receipts, which she discarded. She mentioned needing to return on Monday to put out Huffman's trash can and asked if there was anything else to check. I said no, as I had already searched the hall closet and kitchen. We'd review the contents of the desk box at home. Back home, Mickey and I sorted through the papers, discarding anything unimportant. We found the closing statement for Huffman's house, which was owned by another LLC called Nesco. I discovered files related to Nesco hidden on Huffman's laptop and gave it to Mickey to examine. While Mickey studied the Nesco files, I found a receipt for a safety deposit box rental at Asheville Savings and Loan in the name of Thomas Mayfield. I wondered if one of the 5 keys from Huffman's desk was for that box. 2 keys seemed promising, one for a safety deposit box and another for a post office box. Mickey noted that Nesco had significant assets, including $540,000 remaining after Dave's $500,000 investment, Nesco's properties, and a house in the Cayman Islands. She planned to check if the key opened the Asheville P.O. box the next day, but was unsure how to handle the safety deposit box. I speculated that one of the other keys might be for the Cayman Islands house or a bank account there. We spent the day discussing Mayfield Enterprises and the Deadwood Saloon Hotel and Casino. We agreed to pay the $150,000 due diligence by April and visit Deadwood in May to find a reason to back out of the purchase if needed. Until then, I would return to Memphis for work while Mickey resumed her job. Before leaving on Sunday, I asked Mickey if I could trust her now that Huffman was gone. She assured me we were in this together and would need each other to succeed. I told her I'd see her in 2 weeks. During my 2 weeks in Memphis, I completed my projects and took a week off. When I got home, Mickey updated me on her activities. She had been checking the Nesco P.O. box daily, finding only junk mail and a Visa bill, which she paid using Huffman's password to access Nesco's bank accounts. I planned a trip to the Cayman Islands to check out Nesco's house. Mickey wanted to join, but couldn't get time off on short notice. I arrived in Grand Cayman on Sunday at 2 p.m., took a cab to the 2-bedroom bungalow with a Caribbean view, and found it furnished but dusty and musty. I emailed Mickey about the house, and she suggested hiring a cleaning service to maintain it monthly, funded by Nesco. We planned to use it as a vacation home and potentially rent it out. I enjoyed the weather and beach until Thursday before returning home. When I got home, Mickey proposed merging Nesco with Mayfield Enterprises. This would allow us to sell Dave's house and keep the Cayman house. To do this, I'd need to impersonate David Huffman to get a lawyer to give Mickey power of attorney for the merger. Mickey suggested growing a mustache and having her style my hair to resemble Huffman's photos. She had a lawyer lined up who wouldn't be suspicious. Mickey planned to create a merger agreement and a buyout agreement for Huffman's share of Nesco. We would pay Huffman's share into an offshore Cayman account and later withdraw the money. Mickey also instructed me to open the safety deposit box at Asheville Savings and Loan. It took me 2 weeks to grow a suitable mustache. Mickey styled my hair and we successfully fooled the lawyer. While Mickey worked on the merger, I went to Asheville to access the safety deposit box. Inside, I found a .32, $20,000 in cash, a passport with Huffman's picture, but in my name, and a passbook showing over $1 million in a Grand Cayman bank account. I took a few deep breaths, then collected the items, including several papers, the card with phone numbers and passwords, and put everything in my briefcase. When I got home, I showed Mickey what I took from the safety deposit box. She took $10,000 for herself and gave me $10,000. Mickey used the passwords from the card to access Huffman's Grand Cayman bank account. Since the account was numbered and unregistered, we could control the funds. Mickey changed the account password and suggested we leave the money there for future use. With Huffman out of the picture, we focused on Mayfield Enterprises and the Deadwood Saloon Hotel and Casino. We planned to visit the property to evaluate if we could exit the purchase deal. If not, we'd need to learn how to run a hotel and casino. On December 19, 2013, I reflected on the past year while having a drink. 10 months earlier, Mickey and her lover, Dave Huffman, had plotted to off me. After confronting them, Huffman died. Now, I was president and CEO of Mayfield Enterprises with Mickey as CFO. In May, we inspected the Deadwood Saloon Hotel and Casino, found no grounds to void the contract, and proceeded with the purchase. I moved to Deadwood to manage renovations while Mickey managed finances and continued her brokerage work in North Carolina. Over the past few months, Mickey and I renovated the Deadwood Hotel and Casino, now renamed Mayfield's 1870 Saloon, for its grand reopening on December 21st. I admired the completed renovation as I headed to my truck. While reaching for the truck door, a voice asked if I was Tom Mayfield. Before I could react, 3 men assaulted me. 2 restrained my arms with zip ties, while the third covered my head with a bag. They forced me against a wall, and one punched me to silence me. A car approached, and I was pushed into the back seat and forced down to the floor. I feared the worst. Was this about the Deadwood property or a betrayal by Mickey? After about half an hour, the car stopped, entered a garage, and I was dragged into a house. They led me down a hallway and into a room where they shoved me into a chair and told me to stay quiet. With the bag over my head, I could only see the floor. One abductor announced, "We got him," followed by a gravelly voice asking if I gave any trouble, to which another voice responded with laughter, "No trouble." The gravelly voice then ordered, "Go get CJ." I had no idea who CJ was or what was happening. I immediately recognized it was a woman approaching by the clacking of her heels on the hardwood floor and the intoxicating scent of her perfume. As she neared, I could see her stylish shoes and delicate ankles. Despite my dire situation, these details caught my attention. Without warning, she struck me hard on the left side of my jaw, leaving me dazed. I braced for another blow, but instead, she removed the bag from my head. It took a moment to focus, but I saw a woman with big, dark brown eyes, a pretty face, and long, almost black hair. Scars on her forehead and chin did not detract from her beauty. After a brief stare, she turned and shouted, "That's not him! You brought me the wrong man!" Confusion settled in as one of the abductors insisted I was Tom Mayfield, the person they were supposed to grab. CJ, the woman, was angry and demanded to know who I was. I introduced myself as Tom Mayfield, which only seemed to frustrate her more. She asked if I knew Howard Mason, and I replied I had never heard of him. CJ then turned to the middle-aged man with the gravelly voice and complained about the mistakes of her team. Jimmy, another abductor, pointed out that I had claimed to be Tom Mayfield and questioned whether the picture was of me or not. CJ asked to see the picture and held it up in front of me. The image was of David Huffman standing next to the cobalt blue 2013 Corvette, the same car parked in my garage. I could think of no lie to extricate myself from this situation, so I told the truth. I admitted knowing Huffman as a scam artist who tried to steal my identity. When CJ asked where Huffman was, I requested she cut the zip ties cutting into my wrists in exchange for the information. CJ ordered Jimmy to cut me loose. Once my hands were free, I told CJ that the last time I saw Huffman, he was in North Carolina and had just bought the car in the picture. Noticing CJ's anger, I asked how much he had taken from her. CJ sat down in front of me and revealed that Huffman, under the name Howard Mason, had stolen over $500,000 from her inheritance. She explained that she had met him 5 years ago when he promised to use her money to buy land in North Carolina and later sell it for a profit. After a car accident kept her in the hospital, she found herself unable to locate him and had been searching ever since. I mentioned that Huffman's actions against CJ were detailed in a blue notebook I had. When I asked if the C in CJ stood for Claire, she was surprised. I offered to show her the information at my house in Deadwood, suggesting it would help her understand the situation better. CJ was wary but agreed to come, bringing Jimmy and his friends along. On the drive back to Deadwood, I sat between Jimmy and Dan while CJ drove. Upon arriving home, I warned Jimmy about a Colt in my safe and asked him to wait as I handled it myself. I opened the safe, handed it to Jimmy, and retrieved 2 notebooks. I then brought them into the living room, suggesting Jimmy and Dan wait in the kitchen to keep things discreet. I offered CJ a drink, and she opted for a bourbon on the rocks, humorously noting this wasn't a date. I explained how CJ had traced me through a Corvette lease, confirming my identity with the hotel in Deadwood. I shared how Mickey and I ended up in Asheville, discovered her affair with Huffman, and their plot to end me. I showed CJ the green notebook detailing Huffman's plan to steal my identity, and later end Mickey. CJ asked about the outcome, and I handed her the blue notebook, suggesting she read it alone. When I returned to the living room, CJ was in tears. Realizing Huffman had deliberately tried to end her, she gave the car keys to Jimmy and asked him and Dan to return to the house while she and I discussed things privately. Jimmy handed her my Colt before leaving. After being alone, CJ asked if I was a threat, and I reassured her I wasn't. She explained her scars were from a 2010 accident where she fell off a cliff, leading to severe injuries and memory loss. I shared that Mickey had used cyanide to off Huffman, avoiding police involvement to prevent financial complications for Mayfield Enterprises. Mickey and I were now divorced, but continued as business partners, with her handling finances and me managing operations. CJ, who introduced herself as Claire Johnson, a CPA from Erie, Pennsylvania, and whose father rented the house where I was held, asked to stay the night and borrow a t-shirt. I agreed. The next morning, I confirmed CJ's story with Mickey and offered to drive CJ back after she packed. CJ recognized the Corvette from the photo with Howard and was surprised it was now mine, explaining it was registered in my name Since Howard had used my identity, CJ said the house was in Sturgis. I invited her for lunch in Deadwood, promising to discuss something important afterward. She met me at Patty O'Neill's Irish pub and then joined me at my office, where I showed her a spreadsheet of the Deadwood Hotel and casino's finances. I explained the spreadsheets. One detailed the $1.5 million purchase price for the hotel, including payments, loans, and costs. CJ, a CPA, was frustrated but understood. The other spreadsheet covered Mayfield Enterprises' startup funds, showing $500,000 each from Mickey and Huffman, plus $890,000 from merging with Nesco LLC, including Huffman's house sold for $490,000. I explained that the $1.5 million likely included the $500,000 Huffman took from CJ. Shocked, CJ considered two options: a $500,000 annuity providing $2,000 monthly for 20 years, or joining us as an equal partner and CFO of Mayfield Enterprises, with a salary, benefits, and bonuses. CJ worried about her teaching job. I suggested she could work remotely or full-time, which I preferred. Mickey would be vice president, focusing on investments. CJ was given 2 weeks to decide. She stayed for the grand opening of the Deadwood Hotel and Casino and Mayfield's 1870 Saloon, enjoying the slots while her father played blackjack. By Friday, with no call from CJ, I worried she might choose the annuity and stay in Erie. On Saturday, CJ arrived unannounced, ready to start as my new partner. She moved into my spare bedroom and later found an apartment near the hotel. Expressing my reluctance for her to leave, I admitted I enjoyed her hugs. CJ suggested a more intimate gesture, leading to a passionate kiss and taking us to the bedroom. Our kissing grew more intense as we undressed each other. "Are you sure this is what you want?" I asked. For the next several minutes, we talked about what we had just done, and then CJ said, "If we are going to have any kind of a relationship, you will have to promise me that you will not date or have closeness with other women." "I can commit to that if you agree to do the same," I said. After our first night together, CJ didn't move out, but also didn't officially move in. She left her belongings in the spare bedroom, yet spent every night with me. 2 months later, Mickey visited Deadwood to meet CJ. They quickly warmed to each other, sharing a laugh over their history with 2 men, one good and one bad. After Mickey and CJ went to lunch, they returned in high spirits. Mickey updated me on her new boyfriend, Dr. Jimmy Hogan from Asheville, and suggested discussing Mayfield Enterprises with CJ. The next morning, a visitor arrived at the hotel, a private detective named Leander Mossman from New Orleans. He was looking for Larry Taylor, who had stolen $700,000 from clients and promised to invest in a Deadwood casino. Mossman showed a photo of a younger Huffman, which CJ and Mickey didn't recognize. Mossman wanted to know if Taylor was involved with the casino, hotel, and saloon now owned by Mayfield Enterprises. CJ confirmed that she, Mickey, and I owned the businesses. Mossman left, acknowledging the case as a dead end. I advised CJ and Mickey to keep the visit confidential and refocus on our work. CJ questioned if Mossman suspected them of lying, but I suggested we move on. The Deadwood properties exceeded expectations, with the hotel at nearly 80% occupancy and the casino busy daily. I proposed a vacation to the Cayman Islands in October, which CJ gladly accepted. On Grand Cayman, I proposed to CJ, and she accepted enthusiastically. We married at Deadwood Town Hall, with a reception at Mayfield's 1870 Saloon. Mickey and her boyfriend were there, and they later married in Las Vegas, where CJ and I were witnesses. By June 2016, CJ and I had a 1-year-old daughter and another on the way. Greg Hadley, our head of security, reported 2 men acting suspiciously at the casino, taking pictures, and then entering the saloon. The men, John Benson and Bill Martin, presented a $4 million offer for the hotel, casino, and saloon. I noted the property's high revenue and said a higher offer would be required. They promised to return with a revised offer, but refused to reveal their clients. Greg recorded the conversation, which I reviewed with CJ and Mickey. The team discussed the legitimacy of the offer from Benson and Martin. Mickey doubted they believed the property's revenue, but suggested countering any offer they made. CJ considered accepting a higher offer if it came in, suggesting $5 million might be worth it. When Benson and Martin returned with a $5 million offer, it was countered with $6 million. They accepted without hesitation and did not request financials, raising suspicions about their true intentions. After closing the deal, CJ, Brittany, and I moved to Asheville, North Carolina, where we settled in with our furniture and Corvette. Relations with Mickey improved, and we expanded Mayfield Enterprises with new franchises. Our second child, Thomas Matfield Jr., was born in October, and Mickey announced her pregnancy. In April, after Mickey's daughter Ashley was born, IRS agent James Seymour called about a potential audit of Mayfield Enterprises' origins. I hosted Seymour at our home, introduced him to CJ and Mickey, and he inquired about the Deadwood Hotel and Casino sale to the Treadway Syndicate. We only dealt with agents and suspected the $6 million price might involve money laundering. Seymour confirmed the Treadway Syndicate's pattern of overpaying for properties, but found no direct connection to us. Later, during a cookout with Mickey, Jimmy, and Ashley, I took a phone call about suspicious activity at the Deadwood Hotel. Greg Hadley, the head of security, reported pills trafficking. Local and state police, joined by the FBI and IRS, raided the hotel, finding hard pills and revealing the casino was used for pills laundering. The Deadwood police and state police had seized the property under South Dakota's asset forfeiture law and were offering it to us for $2 million. CJ reacted with shock, and Mickey asked how soon a decision was needed. We had a couple of weeks, but delaying could increase the price due to federal interest. CJ noted the publicity might make the hotel famous, increasing room rates and visitors. We agreed to proceed, but would need to find reliable managers for the property to avoid living there full-time. Mickey and CJ were both in favor of the purchase. By March 2020, business at the repurchased Deadwood Hotel and Casino was thriving, with gross revenues over $1.5 million annually. Other ventures were also successful. Despite the looming threat of the COVID-19 pandemic, which would likely impact Mayfield Enterprises, we had sufficient funds in the Grand Cayman Bank to endure the financial strain and planned to keep our employees on as long as possible. Reflecting on the past 7 years, I was astonished by how my fortunes changed, starting with a sociopathic con man who sought wealth through deceit and ended up buried by his own actions. Now, as president and CEO of the company he founded, I inherited his Corvette, took over Nesco, accessed his Cayman Islands account, and acquired the hotel and casino he coveted. Most importantly, without his interference, I would never have met CJ. In the end, the con man's greed led to his downfall, while it led me to a successful, fulfilling life with a wonderful family.